Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free. And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
Welcome. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Today is Friday, January 17th, 2014. That's right, 17 days into the new year. We are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I would like to welcome everybody around the world right now listening to the show. This is live, and we have got a great one lined up tonight. You know how I start off every show. Started off with a salute to the proud men and women in uniform all around the world fighting the good fight for us. Without them, there is no me, there is no you, there is no us. And you can't hear me right now. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, Facebook, YouTube. Subscribe, like. Everything is Fade to Black or Jimmy Church or Jimmy Church Radio, J Church Radio. It's easy to find. Please go follow, like, and subscribe. Stay up to date. Tonight, we'll try to get to some open lines. We've got two exciting guests. We've got a full show, but if I can get to your phone calls, we will do that in the second segment. The call-in number, you have it. It is 323-825-5045, and I'll let you know when the phone lines open up. You can always email throughout the show. The producers here will get me the best ones. I read them all. I might even respond. All right. You can do that all over the website. We do use non-NSA special encrypted servers. Bumper music tonight is Doug Aldrich from Whitesnake, as always. And the virtual viewer for Giza is up on the contacts page. Go and check that out. That's the reason to even be on the internet. The forums page, by the way, is up and running. It has been up and running, but we fixed a few glitches, and everything is there. There's been a lot of posting in the last 24 hours. Please participate. I do. So if you've got something to say, now we've also got the ability to post pictures inside the forum itself. Okay, so stay active. After the show tonight, I will jump on the forums like I always do. Okay? All right, and last night I did a long ramble about the internet and some of the stuff that Congress and the FCC have up in front of them right now about the internet, and I got a bunch of email about that overnight. And one of the stories, one of the emails had a story, and this came in from Brian, and it said that this is on MSN Money. Even refrigerators are getting hacked. Got that story up on the website at jimmychurchradio.com, so go and check that out. And over at artbell.com, and by the way, sitting in for Art is a privilege. It's not a right. And over at artbell.com, I'm very proud. There's a new article. Mystery rock shows up in front of the Mars rover. Go and check that out. It is just look at the photographs and you tell me. It almost looks photoshopped. And it's from NASA. I don't know how to take it. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go a straight hour. That's right, a straight hour with Stephen Bassett, uninterrupted. This is Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church, on the Dark Matter Radio Network. Stay with us. Don't touch that mouse. When we come back, that's right, PRG, Stephen Bassett, will be in for an hour. No commercials. Back in a second. One 800-916-6232. That's the number you need to call when you are seeking spiritual enlightenment and searching for your true purpose here on earth. www.lovespellstoday.com. They provide psychic readings, love spells, reversal of spells, custom spells, chakra balancing, energy work. Divine guidance is just one phone call away. Call 1-800-916-6232 for your free psychic reading. I did. And tell them Jimmy sent you.
Hello, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
My name is Nick Dominguez.
Hi, I'm Rex Dominguez, and I listen to jimmychurchradio.com. Jimmy is your preacher.
Amen.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier, and this is Ari Gold. We're of the Honey Brothers. We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
KJCR.
jimmychurchradio.com.
Despite popular opinion, reading a book will not make you smarter.
But listening to Jimmy Church will, on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Oh, yeah. Welcome back. Fade to Black. That's the show. On the Dark Matter Radio Network, KJCR. We are live from Burbank, California. From the JP Motorsports Studios. Beautiful day here today. But the studio is dark. It's a little creepy, as always. And I've just got to say, I'm really excited about this next guest. And the build up to this show and the email coming in. This is a conversation as always, but Stephen Bassett is a political activist and a leading advocate for ending the 67-year government-imposed truth embargo regarding an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He is the executive director of Paradigm Research Group, otherwise known as PRG, which recently produced the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C. Stephen has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of formal disclosure of the extraterrestrial presence. And his advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media. In January this month, the 2014 Paradigm Research Group will begin a Congressional Hearing Initiative seeking the first hearings on Capitol Hill regarding the ET issue since 1968. I'd like to welcome to the show right now, Stephen Bassett. Stephen, are you with us?
I sure am, Jimmy, and my best to you and to Art Bell.
And, thank you. And his return is soon. I don't know what they're going to do with me, Steve, but let's hope they find room for me. When that happens. That is a mouthful of a bio, and it is very impressive. And I just want to, first off, thank you for coming on the show, but, thank you for what you are doing. And we were talking a little bit before the show. It's daunting at best. I just don't know. I don't know how my nerves can handle it, and I don't know how you can, but we're very proud and thankful for everything that you've been doing.
You're welcome.
So let's jump to it. The listeners on the show every night are accustomed to what we do here, which is it's just a conversation. That's all we do. We just sit and we get comfortable. We're in my living room and we just take the conversation where it goes. But the first thing that I have to ask you is how did you choose this career path? I mean, what happened in your life that this became your mission?
Well, the short answer is I simply chose it. Ultimately, that's what it is. I made the decision in 1995, late 1995, that I just wasn't interested in anything I was doing with my life. I really didn't have a career, and I was not very happy. And it was time to make a serious change. Call it a midlife crisis.
Okay.
I could have bought a convertible. I could have joined the Peace Corps. There's a lot of things you can do at that point. But I had always followed the issue. I had a degree in physics, scientific, worldview, I guess you could say. And as it happened, a number of things had emerged about that time, particularly the work of John Mack at Cambridge Hospital. And I read that book, Abduction. And something in me said, this is where to go. Engage this issue. I was convinced long ago that ETs were here. I mean, it was really not an issue for me at all. The question is, well, why hasn't the government acknowledged it? So I felt that it's probably the biggest issue in history, and I had a chance to get involved. I didn't exactly know how, but there it was. And one of the lessons I'd learned in my 49 years, and of the few that I had learned, was there's almost nothing you can't get involved with if you're willing to work for free. A lesson that I think every kid needs to know by the time they're 13. It isn't all about getting a paycheck. It's about what do you want to do. So I was fortunate that I was able to get John Mack's organization in Cambridge to allow me to come out and volunteer for them, and that's how I entered the field, which was a very high level and high energy opening, which was fortunate. But ultimately, while there in Cambridge, I decided after about 4 months that where to go was the politics. That I was an activist at heart, never really threw myself into activism, only dabbled. But that's kind of who I was, kind of a maverick, kind of a renegade, problems with authority.
Right.
And I realized that the door was wide open to engage this in a formal political way. There was no political action committee for this issue. There was no lobbyist that ever registered on this issue. If it wasn't for the truth embargo, this would certainly be the case. But the government, of course, has denied there's any ETs here at all. So why would you have those structures?
Well,
and I went to Washington and set up shop, registered as a lobbyist, which I knew would garnish immediate attention from the media. So nobody had ever done it, and they always track who the new lobbyist registrations are. Quickly got some media attention, including a front page piece on the business section of the Washington Post. Not too long after that, I created the Political Action Committee, XPAC, and ever since, essentially, have been engaging the issue as an advocate for the truth from the government, for the end of the truth embargo, or what used to be called the UFO cover-up. So it's really that simple. I made a particular choice. It was mostly an intellectual choice. I'm not a contactee. I've never even had a sighting. But it was an activist choice, because once you look into this field, you realize the extraordinary implications of this truth embargo still in place after 67 years, the potential implications for the human race if we end it, and then there's also all of the problems that have evolved since World War II. The systemic dysfunction has developed. And so it's, an activist dream in a way. It's a very unusual activist track, and it's never been anyone quite like it, I think. But it's not as bad as some. I mean, I don't have to be chased. I don't have to worry about getting hit by water cannons or run down by police dogs.
Right.
I don't have to worry about getting hit over the head by British soldiers, or any number of things that other activists have dealt with in social advocacy movements of the 20th century. But we're dealing with a much more complex resistance, and that's what makes it fascinating, but also very frustrating.
Do you do it from here, or did you live in Washington? I mean, it's a full-time gig, so how did?
Well, I've been based in Bethesda for 17 years.
Right.
I move around a great deal. I travel a great deal.
Right.
I'm working on a documentary in Los Angeles right now, and so I'm operating here, but I go back and forth. But yeah, Washington is where this will be resolved. But the entertainment industry in Los Angeles may be the key to that resolution, or at least the key to the funding of the advocacy.
But I don't want to cut you off, but that is a point that I have often brought up on this show. That exact point. And with the way that Washington and Hollywood are connected, it may be an intrinsic connection, but I think it's an obvious connection. And when you look at what the public is paying for on these blockbusters, seems to be one message after another about they are here. You know, and so I totally agree with you that one of the ways to go is through Hollywood if you're going to get the message out.
It's tricky. We don't know whether government or military have had anything to do with the plethora of E.T. movies. There have been over 300 since 1951.
Right.
And we know that some of these movies have gotten the cooperation of the military in particular.
Mm-hmm.
But if the military likes the movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that they don't work together. In fact, all the military services, as well as the agencies, particularly CIA, have liaisons to Hollywood because they interact with respect to movies that are going to address those subject matters. But a lot of people think that, well, literally, Washington is pulling the strings on some of these producers, and they're like puppets, and if they want something about ETs to go out, they do it. That hasn't been proven, but it's a fascinating area of study. There is one blog that is absolutely essential if you want to go there, and that is the Silver Screen Saucers blog.
Oh, I love that blog.
Graham.
Yes.
Silver Screen Saucers. And there's been some interesting posts recently, which certainly are raising the degree of collaboration that may have existed. There's a wonderful story. I say a wonderful story. There's a very telling story involving Independence Day, a very successful movie. And that movie was gotten underway, and it was about the president, who was a former jet pilot, and we're being attacked by extraterrestrials, and we saved the Earth on Independence Day. I mean, this is just like a recruiting movie for the military, and so the Air Force was on board, and they were getting whatever degrees of cooperation they needed until somebody in the, exactly all the details I don't know, but somebody in the Air Force liaison learned that the movie was going to have references to Area 51 in Roswell. And, of course, the Roswell crash vehicle, at which point the Air Force said, if you're going to, either change the names or drop it out or whatever, or we won't cooperate. And the director, to his great credit, said, fine, we'll do it without you. So there you get a little glimpse, right, of the connection. But here's the deal. There's two capitals in the United States, the two places that most affect, I guess you could say, the lifestyle of the American people. One is on the East Coast, that's Washington, and they affect that lifestyle through huge numbers of laws, judicial decisions, and so forth. And the other is Los Angeles, the center of the entertainment industry, which generates mass amounts of television and movies, which hugely affect what people think. They operate in different ways, and they're very different places. But without question, the entertainment industry in Los Angeles has played a critical role in raising the awareness of extraterrestrials to virtually 100% market share. Now, what does that mean? It means if you had a product at 100% market awareness, you would be a very, very wealthy person. And because of Hollywood, there's all that you could walk up to 100 people on the street anywhere in the country and say, do you know what a flying saucer is? You know what an extraterrestrial is? And all 100 are going to know. So that is extremely important to an advocate trying to end the truth embargo, that mass awareness. Hollywood did that. Now, it's also the case that entertainment industry here has gotten very politically active. As you know, there's almost no advocacy arena that members of this community haven't gotten involved in. Put their money in, put their face in front of it, and that's good. By and large, I have no problem with that. They've also made movies which powerfully put forward very political statements about things as that were happening, either directly or indirectly, under pure drama. And that's fine too. But interestingly enough, the entertainment industry has virtually done nothing to thwart the truth embargo on the ET presence or assist the advocacy movement, with a couple of exceptions. And that's interesting. So I've always known that if some powerful people in this town were to step forward and say, look, enough's enough, we know damn well there's extraterrestrials here, that's one of the reasons we make these movies, that might just end the truth embargo, or if they were to provide funding for the advocacy movement, either publicly or privately.
Well, what it has done is the old statements, the old urban myth was, it'll be anarchy, chaos in the streets, religions collapse.
Yeah,
but the more that they do this, it's on the front of everybody's mind, and now it's an acceptable situation. If they do choose to disclose, it'll the exact opposite. I don't think religions are going to collapse, and I don't think there's going to be chaos in the streets. No. And that is what Hollywood has provided. So that excuse, which started in the 50s, but that excuse, that story, I think, is evaporated and has gone away.
Yes, it has. And so the entertainment world has played an important role there. Whether intentional or otherwise. In fact, I would go even further. Once there's disclosure, then very quickly the knowledge, at least what we know, what the citizen science movement has accomplished in terms of what we know about the ETs, and that becomes sort of accepted, meaning, okay, that's what they are. I mean, the people are going to be very disappointed. I mean, the ETs described by the contactees are just not as interesting as the ones in the movie. So they're going to be kind of disappointed. The ETs are just not more exciting, and it'll be anticlimactic. I mean, that's the difference between now and 1950.
Yes, and I know you get this question all the time, but I haven't asked you. I'm going to ask you now. Are we any closer today with all of your efforts to disclosure, and with Greer's documentary and everything that's happened in the last couple of years, serious inroads? Are we closer? What's your gut telling you?
Well, we certainly are, but it's one thing to measure how close you are to the end of a marathon. You just ask one of the helpers and say, how far you got? You got 1.2 miles. I mean, that's real easy.
Right.
But when you're trying to measure the distance between this moment in time and the moment when the most profound event in human history takes place, you're dealing with thousands of variables, and so it's much more complicated. One of the analogies I use is imagine an apple on a tree just hanging up there, ripening away. You know that every day that apple's a little closer to falling off the tree, but the nature of how it's attached to the tree and obviously that's living matter and so forth, it's very difficult to be able to predict when. You just know you're getting there. So every day we get a little closer to disclosure, and some days things happen in which you feel like you've been set back. Some days you feel like, you've stepped forward, but really the way you have to look at it is very macroscopically. You look at the total global interaction with the issue and what's happening worldwide, and you analyze that over periods of like 2, 3, 4, 5 months, 6 months. And when you do, there's no question that we've been moving steadily toward disclosure in a somewhat accelerated pace since 1992.
When you're moving around in those inner circles in Washington, you don't have to name names, but have you ever had somebody, a politician, just like nudge you and whisper in your ear, you're doing good, or maybe even hear the opposite, man, you got to give this up?
I've never heard that. The latter. I have heard versions of the former. Look, I've had some people in government confirm to me the ET presence is real. That's kind of nice.
Right.
I already knew it though, but still, it's nice. Not surprisingly, they would never say it publicly.
Right.
Let's just say that if you think of Washington as 1,000 staffers on the Hill, thousands of military personnel working out of the bases there. You've got several, plus the Pentagon. And, of course, the thousands and thousands of people working in the intelligence agencies. Let's not even get into the civil service.
Right.
Just those.
Right.
I can assure you that just based on the many polls that have been taken of Americans, that probably 60 to 65% of all of them believe the ET presence is real. Because the polling shows that the higher your income and education, the more likely you are to think the phenomena is extraterrestrial. But the average is around 49, 48, 50%. But if you're higher income, higher education, it's more in the 60, 65% range. Well, most of the people working in the military and intelligence services on the Hill are educated people with some income. So we're talking 65% of everybody working in the military, the Pentagon, the intelligence agencies, and the congressional staffers and White House staffers privately, remember these polls are private, anonymous polls, right? Privately believe ET's already here, but it gets better because the efforts to try to determine how much contact is going on between humans, covert contact is going on between humans and extraterrestrials. It's obviously extremely difficult to get a precise number, but the surveys that are done and the efforts that are made seem to come up with numbers between 2 and 6, 7%. Let's take the absolute bottom, 2%. That's 2% of the American people are having direct contact with extraterrestrials. That's about 6 million people. So now let's take 2% of everybody working in Washington, as I mentioned.
Right.
That means throughout the Congress, the military, and the intelligence, you have a number of contactees, and many of them are aware of it.
Right.
They have conscious memories.
Sure.
So consider that. So you get an idea of this Rubicon that exists between our current status, where you have this massive truth that increasingly people know is true, but the government formally denies exists. You've got people that are contactees. You've got most of the government personally knowing it's true, and yet the policy remains nothing is going on. You can imagine that the pressure to cross that river is growing with every day. It's a very absurd situation in some respects.
What I don't...
But it's not unprecedented in history. And in the past, the crossing that river was very difficult. This is still a constitutional republic. It's not a totalitarian state yet.
Right.
And we have a lot of power in private hands still. And so they're going to have to make their move pretty soon. But that's just to give you a sense of the discrepancy between a government policy and the reality on the ground. I mean, the gap is just huge.
It seems to me, and it's a little confusing, but here's a repetitive example with the president, each elected president. It seems like they have their own little UFO story, or they have a UFO, some type of conversation with somebody, and they're interested in the subject. And this goes back all the way to today. And then suddenly they take office, and then there's nothing. So who behind the scenes, and this we all think about it, but who has that kind of juice to silence every single seated president? I don't understand how that happens.
Silences, or no single person runs this truth embargo. The truth embargo is a complex policy initiated in the late 40s, early 1950s. I think formally launched by the Robertson panel.
Well, we're going to talk. Yeah, we're going to come back and talk about that specifically. But continue.
Yeah, and so this was, a lot of very, very smart people, most of whom were involved in winning World War II. These are non-trivial people,
right?
Who are also literally part of the building of the national security structures that now have become so huge. The NSA, the CIA, the National Security Act, other intelligence compartments of other agencies, and on. All of this was in the early stages in 47 to 52. They literally built it, and they made a decision that this issue had to be ghettoized or contained.
Mm-hmm.
And so they went to great effort to do that. They created the truth embargo, which over time sort of became institutionalized. Same like the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union dealt with their citizens in a similar way. The Soviet Union created huge fabrications to serve the state, all kinds of various histories and protocols that were either completely false or outrageous, but you had no choice. I mean, it was either that or a bullet in the head or a trip to the gulag. And so they created these, and after a while, they became institutionalized. You didn't even think about it. That's just the way it was. It didn't matter if it was true or not. It didn't matter if it was right or not, or even made sense. But you simply went along with it. So you had the institutionalized surreality of the Soviet Union, which of course guaranteed that it would eventually collapse, which it did.
Right.
Unfortunately, the United States has also gone there, and increasingly so since 47, which is one of the reasons that we're now starting to come apart a bit. And in other words, we won the Cold War, decided, wow, we defeated these guys, now let's emulate them. I don't know who came up with that idea, but I wish they had stayed home that day. So right now the truth embargo is really institutionalized, and the real question is who and how will the deal be struck within the elements of government that can strike a deal, can come together and make the arrangements and the deal that will allow the president to step before the American people and disclose.
When it seems, and we have the ability of hindsight now today, but it seemed from 1947 to 51, 52, there was an openness to talk about it on an official scale, and then suddenly,
sort of, but people weren't on the same page yet.
Exactly.
They didn't know they weren't supposed to say anything.
Right.
It wasn't like they were eager to. But the memos hadn't gotten around, and things were unfolding in real time. And so it took a number of years for the government to get their act together.
Right.
A perfect example of this is that most people don't think about this, but we came within a couple of 2 hours, perhaps, of having the ET presence acknowledged and out in the open in 1947.
That's right.
In July. Because the Air Force, Army Air Force Base had put out the press release that they'd captured a saucer. That went up into the news. It was in several papers around the country. And reporters were climbing on very slow planes and slow trains and getting in their cars and heading for Roswell to start interviewing anybody they can get their hands on. But in a few hours, Truman was able to make a decision, pass that to General Ramey in Dallas-Fort Worth, and say, look, you turn that around right now. So Ramey calls Marcel, brings him over to Dallas-Fort Worth and at that base, and hands him some raw wind weather balloon debris and says, hold that up, and this is a weather balloon. And turn the story around. But if they had somehow not been able to do that, if they weren't able to get their act together, and those reporters had gotten to Roswell and started interviewing people around town, including some of the military, that would have been it.
Right.
And we would have had disclosure in 1947. So that's how close we came. Then, after, obviously that was a shock to the system. So from 47, they obviously were they were starting to deal with the fact that they couldn't control what the ETs were doing, and so it was clearly not a secret. How are they going to contain this? And I'm sure they were working on it. They sort of had a breather there for a while. They started trying to shoot the things down, which was a mistake. The ET started dropping our airplanes out of the sky, and after quite a few of those planes fell out of the sky, we stopped trying to shoot them down. But nevertheless, they had a relative hand on it until 52 July, and that's when they got the bejesus scared out of them. When the ETs, for whatever reason, you'll have to ask the ETs why.
Right.
Big multiple air display over the nation's capital over several days, early July 1952. And that just shook the government up. I mean, they realized that, whoa, what are we going to do?
Well, yeah.
You can't shoot them down.
No, you can't. They had them on radar, too. Yeah.
And that's why they set up the panel. Just a moment. That's why they had to. That's why they set up the Robertson panel in late '52, was to say, okay, what are we going to do about this? And the Robertson panel, which was a CIA panel, worked for a while and came to a conclusion. Now, we didn't learn about that conclusion until many, many years later, because it wasn't published at the time. But we found that the fundamental conclusion of the panel was, it appears that these craft and whoever's in them do not pose a threat to the United States. But the engagement of this issue by the American people does pose a threat. And therefore, we need to deal with that. And obviously from there, they dealt with that. And you end up with a truth embargo that is still in place now 63 years later.
Do you think you're considered a threat? How does Washington look at you?
I don't know. They've never bothered me. They may have surveilled me. I don't care. They've never been any threats or anything. Every once in a while, I see something happening. I wonder, but no. I think it's the way I've handled my activism and my approach and so forth. I suspect that's it. I don't threaten. I don't demonize. I see their side. I try to see both sides and try to be constructive. On the other hand, I may just be totally ineffective. They just not care. This guy's, he's not going anywhere, and so what do we care what he does?
Right, right. Well,
maybe one day they'll tell me.
I asked you earlier, and I'm just glad I remembered to repeat this. But when you're dealing with that, do you have to put on, a politician's jacket, or are you trying to be a pain in the butt? Which because when governments deal with each other, different countries, everything is polite, no matter how angry or what the situation is. Everybody's polite. You got to stay on the, you got to be a politician. What's your approach?
Well, I've studied most of the major activist movements of the 20th century, and in that regard, let me say this. First and foremost, a political activist, and one of the very first, plays or books written about political activism in the modern sense was "Enemy to People" by Heinrich Ibsen. And I really encourage your listeners to read that book. It's a classic, written some time ago. But this gentleman became an activist in his community. A political activist is someone who, when they're wrong, people hate them. And when they're right, people really hate them. So, first and foremost, people don't like to be told something is wrong or what to do about that. So right away, you're going to irritate people no matter how nice you are. Secondly, I would never put on a politician's jacket or pants or shoes or anything else. It's the last thing I want to be or do, at least in the form that we now see it. And thirdly, the approach that I have taken is yes, you have to. Let me put it this way: I don't want to be a pain in the ass, but the fact is, and if you see examples all the time, all you have to do is tell some pretty straightforward truths, and you're going to be a pain in the ass, because telling the truth in America today is a real problem for people.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not the country we want, and it's not the country the Founding Fathers wanted, but it's what we have post-World War II, post-63 years of the building of a secret empire. The truth has become an irritant and a problem, not an asset. And so truth tellers are a pain in the ass, and liars are useful.
Well, that's exactly it. You have to be annoying.
Yeah, in that sense. I'll tell you, back in the right at the turn of the millennium, remember that? I did some Fox News. I did some CNN. These are mainstream shows, and you can find them on YouTube. And I conducted myself very well, I can assure you. But when I went on these shows, there was no equivocation. I wasn't trying to sugarcoat anything, and I wasn't going to compromise. I basically just said what's what.
Right.
And often I would simply say, "Yeah, there's an extraterrestrial presence." Bingo. And this is like, my God, you can't do that. I mean, you can't say the emperor's got no clothes. I mean, you're supposed to say, well, it kind of looks like the emperor's a little light on clothes today, or whatever. You simply cannot just matter-of-factly say the truth.
Right.
And I just don't do that, and I don't get invited back.
So that approach
I have been invited back on them for some time, but
right.
That's fine. That's okay. So that's the way I operate. And it may or may not be effective. There may be better ways. There may be other modalities that are more effective, at least in the short term. And you see some of these in play. But if I were to use them, I would become useless to myself.
Now you're taking another crack at it. You did the citizens hearing, and now we've got the Congressional Hearing Initiative coming up, and that's kicking off in mid-February. I have a couple of other things that we have to talk about, but tell us about that really quick.
Yes, this is important. TRG has been at this now for 17 years, The goal was always disclosure from the beginning. Didn't think it would take this long, but I'm not surprised now that it did. And we may be on the verge of it. At least certainly PRG is in position to significantly help get the ball across the goal line, if you know what I mean. We got the backing, interestingly enough, not from an American. It's the first major backing PRG has gotten is from a Canadian. And we were able to then fund the citizen hearing on disclosure, as well as the full filming of it, and additional filming that would eventually turn up in a documentary called Truth Embargo. Spent a lot of money. And we conducted this event in Washington, D.C. at the National Press Club, April 29, May 3. What we did was it's never been done before, and that means it's a potential game changer. It's like the football team that comes up with a play that the other team has never seen, and so consequently, boom, they score a touchdown. We brought 40 witnesses from 10 countries to Washington, D.C., put them up for 6 nights in downtown hotel, not cheap. And they then testified for 5 days, 30 hours. And when I say they, I'm talking about 13 of the top researchers in the world and 27 military agency political witnesses. These are people of rank and station with personal experiences with events and evidence confirming the ET presence. They testified in the ballroom of the National Press Club, which was set up to look like a Senate hearing room.
Yes, it was.
And they testified not just to anybody, but to 6 former members of Congress with 80 years of tenure, 3 Republicans, 2 Democrats, and a Libertarian, 3 women, 3 men, 5 congressmen, 5 congresspersons, 1 senator. That's never been done before. And we filmed it all in high definition and webcast it to anybody that wanted to sign up. And what happened was these 6 former members of Congress, 2 of which had just retired a few months before, came in, and I talked with them, very neutral on this subject, not particularly knowledgeable, though we sent them some materials in advance. No real axe to grind, and within about 48 hours, their hair was on fire. They were astounded at the testimony they were seeing and hearing, and we got all of this on tape. So that then set the stage for what could be the final act in this drama, or the final move in this chess game. And it's really fairly simple. I'm going to return to Capitol Hill as the registered lobbyist that I am. But before I get there, we're going to ship a DVD set of the entire citizen hearing, all 30 hours, to every congressional office, 539, I think, or 40, counting the territories. Each set will have about 10 DVDs in it. So we're talking about 5,300 DVDs are going to be shipped to Washington, D.C. at the same time, and they'll arrive in these offices where there's 1,000 staffers with 1,000 laptops with 1,000 DVD players. Now, before they arrive, I'm going to be doing national radio and television, encouraging everybody within the sound of my voice to, tweet storm. Never thought I'd be saying that phrase. Tweet storm and email their 2 senators and congressional representative with a request that they review the material in those DVDs that are about to get, that they talk to me about that, and they also hold hearings for the witnesses that are ready to testify. So they'll be getting all of that as the DVDs are on their way. And then after they arrive, they'll continue to get these emails and tweets. And then shortly after that, I'll be knocking on their door. Now, the DVD set will arrive accompanied by a letter signed by all of the citizen hearing witnesses, again requesting that they hold hearings and indicating they're ready to testify before them. Then I'll start knocking on their door. The way that I'm going to approach Congress is I will identify all of the members of the roughly 7 or 8 appropriate committees and subcommittees in the House and Senate. And in many cases, you have individuals who are on more than one of these 8 committees. So I'll start with those individuals who are on multiple appropriate committees. And I'll be approaching their office with a request to meet. And I'll just work down that list, one after another, after another, after another. I'll be working out of the press club probably, and I'll also hopefully try to get a place nearby. We're looking for a supporter to step up, maybe provide a place nearby, keep the cost down. And after a while, we're going to then send a letter signed by former members of Congress to the committee chairs, just the committee chairs, the 7 or 8 chairs, again requesting that they talk to their members about holding a hearing. All right. And at some point, I will publish a list of all those offices that decline to meet, and I will go on national radio, television, and request that everyone send some nice tweets and emails to those offices requesting that they reconsider. Meanwhile, all of this is happening, with most of it, the most intense part in the first 30 days, starting around mid-February. I have one of the top publicists, independent publicists in Washington, that will be working the media every day to let them know all this is going on and to try to get me on every talk show in D.C. So we're just sort of create a vortex around Congress, sort of a swirling vortex in which they're just getting pummeled from every direction, and then they've got these 5,300 DVDs sitting right there in their offices. And if some of these staffers start putting those DVDs in their computers, what they will see is something that no one has ever seen before, at least not until last May.
Right.
They will see extraordinary witnesses making extraordinary testimony. They'll be seeing former colleagues from Congress intensely listening and asking important, good questions and being astounded by this evidence, and nothing blows up, right? Nobody runs screaming for the room. They will see that it's just really pretty cool. And they will, I think, hopefully understand that if they were to hold hearings for these witnesses, the real hearings, their 10% approval rating might just double or triple.
You didn't mention the president.
Are you guys really can't go any lower? So let's see what we can do to get you maybe back up in the game here. This is why it's Congress's status and the existence of the Congressional Citizen Hearing Disclosure tapes or DVDs that is the game changer. If we get to hearings,
you didn't mention
the embargo will be over. It will last 30 to 60 days, probably 30 days.
Did you send?
Because the moment the cameras pick up the testimony, which obviously there'll be plenty of cameras, and they'll see these witnesses and hear them presenting this material to the actual congressional committees, the media will suddenly be unchained, and they will immediately go into what we call a media feeding frenzy. And you may not know this. I'm sure you do know this. A media feeding frenzy is one of the most powerful forces in the universe.
You think?
Nothing can stop it.
Right.
One of the last true media feeding frenzies occurred during the Clinton administration as the Monica Lewinsky scandal slowly developed. There had been other scandals that had their moments, but this was the big one. And at one point, Linda Tripp, trotted out the blue dress, and the entire media in Washington D.C. went nuclear. And at that point, Bill Clinton could have surrounded the White House with the entire Navy SEAL contingents, and the press would have cut through them like a chainsaw. So what we want to do is basically what I'm doing is I'm going back to Washington and wave a blue dress around. If the media finally flips the switch, it's over. And that is why, since 1968, which is the last time that the Congress held hearings, they held a half-day hearing, a show hearing. It was legitimate. The people that testified were quite serious, and there was some important testimony there, but it wasn't about learning anything. It was about wrapping up the whole thing in government. It was part of the process. They were going to shut everything down to see if they could get out from under the issue, which they did. And they sort of got out from under for about 9 years. The people in the government that know this issue are fully aware that the kind of hearings we're talking about, if they ever took place, that would be the end of the truth embargo, which is why over just the last, since 1990, right, the last 24 years, every attempt, and there's been many, to get hearings in Congress have been blocked, whether they're outside or whether they're inside. And I know of several inside, meaning they're just stopped cold. And usually it's from the intelligence committees, probably the chairs in most cases. And so, I get it. I don't blame them. If I was running the ET issue within the CIA or the DIA, I'd say, gee, we cannot allow hearings to happen. But so they know that, and that's why it hasn't happened. Well, we have a chance to make it happen, in which case that will be the end of the ball game. Finally, we'll learn that we're not alone in the universe, which a lot of people have already figured out. But until the government acknowledges, we're not really going anywhere.
Do you think the president knew about the citizens' hearing? The citizen hearing?
I'm sure he knew. Whether he watched it or saw any of it, I have no idea, but I have no doubt that he knew. I mean, we were holding it in the National Press Club, which is only 2 blocks from the White House.
Right. Did you? Are you going to send him a set of DVDs?
Not a bad idea. Well, thank you. I will.
Okay. And now talking about the truth embargo, we're going to switch gears a little bit, but it's still on subject. I want to talk a little bit about that CIA website. I call it the
possible CIA website.
Yeah. I call it the chock full of nuts site. It's an unbelievable site, and I haven't actually. I guess we can do it now, but I've never said the name of the site because I don't want to in any way have them get a click because on my account. I just don't want to have that happen. But I think most of the listeners out there know about now the Iranian story that came out from FARS about the alien agenda that's been going on here since 1945, and apparently helped the Nazis in the 1930s, which is an even crazier thing. But having that kind of the control of the key word here is truth. Because now you've got a semi-official foreign government news agency accepting what is supposed to be true on some farcical, crazy website here, and then bringing in the Russian intelligence and Snowden, so they had a grain of truth in this. You know, why? I don't understand. But the thing is, and I think you'll agree, you have citizens now in Iran that are believing wholeheartedly, fundamentalists or whatever, what their government is telling them. And I don't understand.
We always have citizens that believe what the government's telling them.
Right. Yeah.
But let me tell you a story. I'm gonna give your audience a pretty good sense of this. We're talking about COINTELPRO. We're talking about counterintelligence, and I encourage everybody to never underestimate the power of propaganda in the hands of extremely skilled individuals and agencies. I assure you, there's almost nothing they can't do given a license to do it. So let me preface the story of this recent article by another story.
Well, before you do, COINTELPRO, explain 10 seconds exactly, because that's what this involves. So what is that?
COINTELPRO is a term that represents a range of counterintelligence operations the government engages in, and in a lot of cases they're not cool. It's the kind of programs where they were infiltrating all the anti-war groups during Vietnam and any other activist groups, sometimes to find out what's going on, sometimes to undermine them. They put out propaganda in every kind of form, misinformation, disinformation. All of this is essentially counterintelligence against activities that are being conducted. Now,
and every country
people think that maybe that kind of thing only happens overseas, and in many cases unlawfully. But it also happens in the U.S. quite a bit. And
that was my point. I was just trying to interject there. Every country engages and has a department for COINTELPRO. Okay, so now go ahead.
Well, let me point out, there's a lot of countries that do a lot of things, but I'm concerned about my country and its constitution, and this habit that the politicians and leaders in this country have of saying, well, Chile does it, Somalia does it, the UK, whatever, does it, therefore we can do it. I'm saying they don't have our constitution,
right?
So I don't give a damn what they're doing,
right?
I'm only interested in what you're doing under the social contract we have. And if you're violating it, then I want you gone. I want you fired. I want you in jail, whatever the hell, So that doesn't matter. But you're seeing a lot of that now. It's sort of like, it's just like children. It's like, Mommy, I want to go to the pool. You can't go to the pool, dear. You haven't learned how to swim. But all the other kids are in the pool. I mean, please, give me a break. All right, so here's the story. Back in the early 1950s, a gentleman by the name of Generoso Pope spent at least a year in the CIA psych program. All right. Not long after that, long after he left the CIA psych program, psychological warfare program, he magically comes up with $75,000 that some believe he actually got from a member of the mafia, which shouldn't surprise anybody. And he takes this money and he buys a paper in New York called the New York Enquirer. it ceases publishing for a while and then reemerges after a while as the National Enquirer and begins to, quote, develop itself. And in due course, the National Enquirer begins to turn up all over the country on newsstands. In other words, it had a real, it's not easy to get market share, but this thing was like cutting butter with a knife, with a hot knife. And before you know it, the National Enquirer is in every grocery store in the country. And that means that just your average Americans, every average American in the country was going to walk by this magazine getting the groceries every single week. And the National Enquirer started printing all kinds of interesting stories, particularly about UFO stuff. And it'd always be often a photo or some thing over the cover, and you just couldn't miss it. So you're in there to buy some milk, and there's the National Enquirer with some UFO story.
Mm-hmm.
In 1969, they went a little further. And by the way, that was the same year that they shut down Blue Book, said that they were out of the UFO business. The Condon report said there was nothing going on here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then shortly after that, they destroyed NICAP. Mr. Pope founded the Weekly World News. Now, the Weekly World News became legendary because this is a paper that made everything up.
Right.
So it was sort of a parody, but it wasn't treated as a parody. It was ahead of its time, I guess. But so the Weekly World News was the paper that you'd be getting some case of beer at the store, and there would be a front cover of the Weekly World News, and there'd be President Nixon standing with an extraterrestrial.
Right.
Later on, it'd be Hillary Clinton holding an extraterrestrial baby.
Right.
Well, it was owned by the National Enquirer, which is still run by Rita Pope, who was a former psychological warfare grad of the CIA. What I'm trying to say here is that the National Enquirer and the Weekly World News were co-intel operations of the CIA designed to create the means to put stuff out there whenever they needed to create disinformation and confusion in the public's mind about any issue they wanted to. And one of their most important ones was ETs and UFOs.
And what was
And they did it for 50 years. Eventually, not too long ago, the Weekly World News was sort of a self-parody and a joke, and it was closed down. And the National Enquirer, of course, Pope had died, became more of just a tabloid. Now there's dozens and dozens of them.
Right.
It would actually occasionally do a legitimate UFO story. But understand, in the first 50 years of the truth embargo, the National Enquirer was an operation of the CIA.
And the intention was to make anybody that believed a little bit in UFOs or flying saucers was just a crazy person, because look, they're buying that. Was that had to have been the intention?
Of course, but their target wasn't the intelligentsia. It was the average person, your high school grad, your high school dropout, just people working people that go to the store to buy food.
Exactly.
See crazy stories about UFOs, so they wouldn't, get maybe focus on it or take it seriously. Right, and that was just one of many, many, many things that the military intelligence groups dealing with ET issue did to create the truth embargo. A lot of money was spent. This is a very, very sophisticated operation.
But that's exactly my point. Yes, there wasn't a whole lot of. It wasn't like it was profitable from the newsstand standpoint. There was money coming in. They were spending money on that propaganda.
It made money too. I mean, it's wonderful. and maybe they got to keep the money, but understand, Generoso Pope, was a CIA graduate of the psych warfare operations at the CIA, and then shortly after that buys the New York Enquirer and launches the National Enquirer. That's all you need to know.
Right.
Now,
and could you get away with that today? You couldn't. There's too much information out there, but back then...
actually, you can get away with that today, and they are getting away with that today. But it's a different time.
Which is what we're going to talk about.
What's the situation now? All right. We moved to the Internet. Now, understand, when the Internet arrives pretty much after World War II is over. I mean, the Cold War is over. And we're in a new time, and the process toward disclosure starts to get underway in a more vigorous manner. So the kinds of interference they were doing, I think, changed a bit. And back in the day, in the 50s, it was aggressive, right? Not so much. But are the intelligence operations using the internet to influence the worldview of people? Oh God, yes. So I'm paying attention. I watch for this stuff. Now let's be clear: the internet and the World Wide Web is the most powerful invention in human history, and it makes it possible for anybody to say anything about anything and put it out there, and that's free speech cubed, and I'm fine with that. And any American citizen that wants to write the most outrageous things, go for it, no problem. Right? Even if the government wants to write outrageous things and put it up on the government websites, no problem. Here's where I have a problem. When government writes outrageous things surreptitiously through front websites designed to influence our policies and actions and our worldview, but without acknowledging that it's the government behind it, well, that's simply pre-totalitarianism. That's Orwellian, and that's a violation of the social contract. People should go to jail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the internet is, but it can happen. And so the internet is free speech, and free speech to a high degree, but as most people know, there are limits to speech, and there are things you can do in terms of passing information that can get you in jail, and rightfully so. Now, what has happened is that recently an article got published that definitely caught my attention. And the reason that it caught my attention is that a few months ago, it's been several months since PRG announced that they were going to do this Congressional Hearing Initiative. It's been out there for some time. We haven't formally launched it. We won't launch until mid-February. But it's been all over the web. It's out there. And I've been waiting to see if there would be a counter-response. Would the government take any measures that might be designed to obstruct or diminish this effort?
Of course. You have to take that position. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm looking for it, right?
Right.
And this was the first thing that made me think, yes, at least one, not every group dealing with this issue, but at least one may have decided, we gotta push back a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
How did it happen? Well, it's simple. There is a website on the web called whatdoesitmean.com. It is the website for, quote, Sorcha Fall, unquote. It's a very odd name, SORCHAFAAL, the Sisters of Sorcha Fall. It's been around for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
It publishes constant stream of articles, highly sophisticated, and this site is pure, unadulterated disinformation.
Everything.
High level.
99%. I found a couple of real articles, actually.
It depends on how you. What I mean by disinformation, really high quality disinformation does this. It mixes some fact,
right,
with fiction, lots of fiction, and creates narratives which are not real but seem to appeal to move you in a direction. And so, what the Sorcha Fall or What Does It Mean site does. And it is able to do this oftentimes within hours of an event taking place. So something will happen, and within a couple of hours, an article comes out of there in which they take some facts
mm-hmm.
and they hook it up to other things,
mm-hmm.
and they concoct a conspiracy thread out of it. That's always wild and crazy and bizarre sometimes not so much. And the whole thing is based upon a supposed insider that's giving this information from the Kremlin. And I can tell you that these articles are not trivial. They are very sophisticated. And a lot of people are going to be taken in by this stuff. And you have to wonder, given how much money it would take to run an operation like this, and the fact that nobody knows who really is behind it or who's financing it,
exactly,
it's kind of suspicious. And so I've known about it, and I've followed it for years, and every once in a while they'll do something. They'll mention the UFO ET issue, but overall, it's one of these things that operates kind of in the basement. It doesn't really get to come up to dinner on the first floor much at all. And so, okay. However, recently something happened which got my attention, namely this. Sorcha Fall put out an article on January the 11th about Iran, about ETs, about Snowden, about Nazis, and they drew Paul Hellyer into it. Now, Paul Hellyer is one of the citizen hearing witnesses.
Mm-hmm.
He's a former defense minister of Canada, and he has been doing interviews. He's a trooper. He's been going out there since he initially engaged this issue in 2005, and he has been stating that he's convinced the extraterrestrials are real, and it's definitely a strong message, and it's not helping the truth embargo whatsoever. And so, okay, they wrote this article, so what? Well, here's the deal. For whatever reason, the Fars News Agency, which is essentially a legitimate mainstream operation out of Iran, picks this story up and puts it out on the Fars News Agency site. And before you know it, unbelievably, Forbes picks it up. The Washington Post picks it up. The Examiner picks it up. The Blaze, but particularly the Washington Post, and they're republishing this stuff and commenting as if it's true, or at least as if it's a legitimate story.
Right.
Which is just beyond the pale.
Right.
I just couldn't believe it. I mean, the Post can get pretty awful, and they've failed the American people over and over and over again. It's still a major paper. So how is it possible that sewage being put out by a disinfo site, whatdoesitmean.com, ends up in a Washington Post piece? Well, given the record that the Washington Post has in dealing with the ET issue, it seemed to me that this was classic COINTELPRO.
Well, where does the funding?
In other words, What Does It Mean site is the National Enquirer of 2000 of the 21st century.
But that's
actually they go back into the 1990s.
Stephen,
you have a site that's generating this stuff, and you can tweak it and twist it and put it out depending upon what you're trying to do, depending upon who you're trying to undermine. It's all about generally undermining legitimacy. It's legitimacy that's a question here. And in this case, the target was Paul Hellyer. We need to delegitimize Paul Hellyer because we can't have former defense ministers of major U.S. allies going around saying ETs are real, because people will actually believe them. And so I said, okay, enough is enough. And so I've gone on the aggressive. I've gotten aggressive on this. I've had enough of whatdoesitmean.com. And I encourage people that have strong research skills to go after the site and find out who owns it, who's behind it, who's financing it, and what is going on there. And also, I encourage people to go to some of these articles at Forbes, this article that turned up at Forbes and Washington Post, and leave comments as to what they think about a major mainstream news article reprinting disinformation from an absurdist site like that in their, quote, high-end publication. Did they do it intentional? Are they that stupid? Do they think the truth embargo is going to rise again? I mean, what's going on here? And so how many sites like whatdoesitmean.com are out there? I think there are a number of them. I think they are there to be used from time to time, like the National Enquirer, which would put out lots of stories about movie stars and other things and what have you, a lot of which is quite true. And then when they needed to use it, they'd slam some stuff into it, stick it up in the grocery store shelves so people could see it. This is Soviet Union stuff. This is Pravda stuff. This is Orwellian. This is what we do not want in this country. And I can assure you, if the American people don't step up pretty soon, and the NSA stuff that's been happening, Jimmy, it's the tip of the iceberg. Let me assure you, if the American people knew the full extent in which the massive intelligence complex in America has been manipulating them, they would be shocked. They would be stunned into apoplexia.
Well,
they don't.
The thing that
being dripped on them.
The thing that shocks me, and what the listeners need to understand and wrap their head around, is this website, the Chock full of nuts. What does it mean? Website. This is not your classic domain that's for money here in America. There's no advertising on this site. There's a lot
they're always asking for money, which is a wonderful cover. In other words, if
exactly.
They could be funded massively by the CIA.
Exactly.
But of course, one way to mask that is to be saying, well, we need some more money now to keep telling you these important truths. This is smart stuff.
I would be shocked. I would be shocked if this is done by some guy in his mom's basement and he's all alone.
Oh God, no.
No, exactly.
They put out thousands of articles over the last 10 years.
Thousands.
This is a very, very sophisticated operation.
It is, and when you look at the website now, I need to support my family like everybody else does. Okay. And when I look at somebody's work and I'm looking at the first thing I want to ask, well, okay, this is great. How is he buying his groceries? How is he paying his electric bill? Because there's no money being generated on this site except for donations. But there's, you know what I mean? It's not capitalistic driven. The money's coming in from somewhere to support this, and it's very, very complex. This is not.
The Soviet Union, the government, the Communist Party paid for it. I mean, everybody understood that. Right? The thing about the Soviet Union, at least they were clear. I mean, there wasn't any ambiguity.
Right.
Everybody knew that the Vestia and the Pravda were the state papers, and the government paid for it and bought the journalist, and they were going to say whatever they were going to say, and a lot of it was going to be lies. Everybody knew the government was brutal and surveilled them, and if you stepped out of line, you go to a gulag. At least it was clear what the rules of the game are. What is so outrageous about the United States is at the very same time we're professing not to do those kinds of things, that we're supposedly aspiring to this higher level of governance, we're doing that stuff. In other words, one thing you could say about the Soviet Union, they weren't hypocrites.
Right.
And if I were writing Dante's Inferno, I'd put hypocrites right at the bottom of hell. And so essentially, we're turning into a nation of institutionalized hypocrites.
Why do you think Hellyer was singled out in this? I don't understand that out of everybody.
Because Hellyer is a former defense minister of Canada. He's a very sharp man of high integrity.
Absolutely.
And he publicly came forward in 2005 in Toronto and stated, look, I've heard some things, I've read some books. I'm convinced that the ET presence is real, and it's here. Now, when you have a former defense minister, actually deputy prime minister of one of the U.S. allies saying these things, that's something the truth embargo is not going to be comfortable with. And so if you're going to attack somebody, if you're going to try to undermine somebody, you go after the Paul Hellyers. You don't go after some guy, living in his basement with a blog. You go after the Paul Hellyers. Well, I'm not going to stand by and let that happen without getting real public about it.
Right.
And by the way, this article made several outright lies about Paul Hellyer.
Yes, it did.
I mean, it was an outrageous hit piece that the Washington, Max Fisher of the Washington Post put straight into the Washington Post website. He should be summarily fired.
He tried to hide behind a tongue-in-cheek attitude at the closing of the article, and that wasn't enough for me.
Well, the Washington Post had its institutional tongue and its institutional cheek now,
right,
for about the last 25 years.
Right.
I mean, they brought down Nixon, and then they basically retired from the serious news business. They've had their moments, but as the major political paper in the United States, given the way they operate, they're really a state paper, not an independent newspaper. Now, they are independent to a degree, but given the responsibility that they have and the position that they have, they should be operating at levels above where they are. I mean, they're not the Memphis paper. They're not the San Jose Mercury.
Right.
They're the Washington Post.
Right.
And they're failing the American people. It's a disgrace. And on the ET issue, their record is beyond bad. And so they'll have to answer for that eventually. Yes, when it all comes out, it'll be a huge, massive black mark on them. But they'll get over it somehow. I mean, if I was Jeff Bezos, and I just put $650 million down cash to buy the Washington Post, boy, I'd be paying close attention to what I'm talking about right now. Unless this guy is in fact some sort of government stooge. Who has been told, okay, Jeff, go buy the Washington Post because we got some plans for it, and we're going to help you on the internet and your business, and you help us and whatever. In which case, well, we're screwed. But if he's legitimate and he wants this paper to be better than it is, then he had better get on his bicycle and start pedaling and start paying attention. Because the Graham family was in the back pocket of the CIA from the beginning. I could go on, but I'm not. I don't want to overplay this.
Well,
it is what it is.
You've got a bunch of
others.
others.
The American media has been compromised for a long time by the intelligence community. This is well known. The American people have let it happen. They haven't really made a big stink about it. There have been a few times when there's been some issues, the Church Committee, of course. But overall, the American people are going, whatever. I get it.
You've got some.
America is funny. And, Churchill said this about America. It will always do the right thing after it's tried every other option. And the American people are that way. They will ignore the danger that's coming until the very last minute, and then they will get really worked up and take action. But sometimes it's too late, and that's something we can't afford.
If I'm in Washington and I'm dealing with you, I tap out. I'm serious. I don't know. I don't know who could deny, and you're tireless, and I just have to say that you've got some other shows, or you've got some other things you're doing tonight, and I know that you've got to get out of here. But thank you for coming in. And is there anything you want to close with really quick before you have to fly?
Well, I mean, if you want to do a little bit after the hour, I can go for about 8:10. That's fine. But if you want to close out now, that's fine too. Whatever.
Yeah, it's 8:15. I've got a couple of other guests coming in, and you said that you had something else you were doing, but that's not neither here nor there.
I got a phone clock here, and it may not be accurate.
No, we are at 8:15, and you gave me a warning. That's why I'm.
Well, my goodness, look, Jimmy, it's been great. I'm gonna check out. Let's get back together again real soon, because I assure you we've only just started to cover what's going on right now.
And I'm going to tell everybody out there. I tried to get 3 hours out of you tonight, and I couldn't. So we will pick this up, and I will talk to you over the weekend.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Stephen. All the best, Stephen Bassett, PRG. The Congressional Hearing Initiative kicks off in February. Thank you, Stephen, for coming in. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, hopefully, we will have Nadine Lalich. We'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark matter. Dark matter. Dark matter. Dark matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
Hello.
Stay with us.
Okay.
Okay, Fade to Black. KJCR, JimmyChurchRadio.com. I am your host. Kicking it off. That was about as intense of an hour and 15 minutes as I have ever had. Thank you, Stephen Bassett, for coming in, the Energizer Bunny. And, okay, I'm going to keep moving, but I've got a bunch of emails that have come in. We will get to those in a second, but to continue to email Jimmy at JimmyChurchRadio.com. That is simple and easy to do. And follow us on Twitter. I'm getting stuff straightened out here in the studio. We're bringing in our next guest immediately. And but anyway, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, YouTube. Shoot us an email. Get over to the website. Participate in the forums. Anything that you want to post there immediately after the show, I jump on those forums. I respond. I hang out. You can call us. I'm going to see if we can get some calls in the third segment. If you want to speak with Nadine, we'll see how the time goes. The number is always 323-825-5045, and I'll let you know when the phone lines open up. Man, I'm all wound up after Stephen Bassett. I'm glad we can kind of chill out a little bit and welcome our next guest. Nadine Lalich has written 2 books, Alien Experiences with Barbara Lamb and The Dream of Becoming. In 2010, she appeared in the documentary The Day Before Disclosure by director Tofness of New Paradigm Films, where she discussed her first abduction that occurred in Sedona, Arizona in 1991. Nadine has also appeared on Discovery Channel's Best Evidence, Alien Abduction, and Discovery Health Channel's program Alternatives to Healing. She has been a guest on numerous radio shows, including Paranormal Radio, Global Focus, and has been a featured speaker and abduction panel speaker at MUFON Orange County and MUFON Los Angeles in 2007, 2008, and in 2009. She is a past board member of the Journal of Abduction Research, otherwise known as JAR, and has written articles for the magazine. Her latest book is Alien Experiences, Book 2, The Abduction of Marie, 22 Years of ET Contact, will be available in May of this year, in 2014. I would like to welcome to the show Nadine Lalich. Nadine, we know you're there.
I'm here, Jimmy.
Oh, wow. Before we move on, I need to chill after Stephen Bassett.
I bet you do. What a fabulous interview with Stephen.
Well, it's all about you, Nadine, but I got to say, just came over, took over the program, and at some, I literally had my feet kicked up on the console here. I was just along for the ride and fascinated too, and
I was too. I mean, he provides some fabulous information for all of us. We all need to hear what he's got to say.
Well, you and I were talking earlier. Stephen's opening up for you tonight, but now you've got a tough act to follow.
That's right.
Oh, well, thank you for coming in, and let's just chill out for a second. Whew, man, that was, it got hot in here and the thing is with all guests, and you and I talked about this earlier, I talked to Stephen about this, and all of the listeners out there, it's just a conversation in my living room. And maybe I shouldn't have said that to Stephen, because that's exactly what it was, but this is just a conversation. I run without scripts and notes. Let's just go and have fun. I'm excited. With you, I can tell that this conversation is just going to cover a lot of things, but just take off and end up somewhere. And I'm really looking forward to it. Let's just relax a little bit. Okay. So, all right. Now, obviously, things started for you in 1991 directly with the incident and the experience that happened in Sedona in Arizona. And I'm sure that was the catalyst to your writing career and your career and all of your research. Did anything happen prior to that? Was there any singular event in your life before that? Or was it Sedona in 1991?
No, prior to Sedona in 1991, quite frankly, I had almost no interest whatsoever in the subject. I certainly have a lot of interest, but that was not a primary one. When I was a teenager, I read some, a little bit of science fiction here and there, and I found it fascinating. But it wasn't a focus in any way, shape, or form. Was it a focus? And even to the extent I think the only movie I'd ever saw years ago was Steven Spielberg's E.T. A few cutesy little things. Hadn't read anything on it other than a few science fiction stories when I was young.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I was catapulted, kicking and screaming, into another dimension, and which left me quite stunned for a number of years before I started to recoup and address the issue.
Well, I asked the same question with nearly every guest, because I nearly always get the same answer, just like you, which is no. I wasn't. I wasn't running around with tinfoil on my head.
Right.
This was the start of it, and I find that a consistent answer, also a fascinating answer, because it is very, very consistent. All right, well, let's start there then. What happened? What happened in Sedona in 1991? Take us through it.
One thing I want to say before I tell that little story is, and I think this is something that, when you stand up and start talking about this kind of anomalous experience, I was just mentioning to a friend of mine who was listening to the show with me tonight, and I said, our consciousness, humanity's consciousness is starting to open up, like Stephen was talking about. We're getting to a place where we have a much higher percentage of people who are actually acknowledging the fact that, wow, there's some crafts out there. We've interacted with them.
Right.
They're intelligently controlled.
Right.
But go to the next level and start talking about the fact that some of us have actually had interactions face-to-face, personal, up close and personal, and you can't grab a hold of that. That takes time. Exposing ourselves to this kind of reality is going to take time, and it is going to be a process. Most of us that have had these bizarre contacts with non-human entities do not want it, are shocked and traumatized by it, don't want to talk about it. And I think that's really important to realize. It's difficult enough to try to share your story out in the world, and you're going to run into all kinds of disbelievers, all kinds of remarks. You're really putting yourself up in the line of fire.
100%.
You. And it was not easy for me to do, because I've got an intellectual ego that wants to look good. I don't want to look like a Looney Tune.
Right. Like
a woo-woo person, the last thing in the world.
Right.
Anyway, so this would not be something I would invite.
Well, how did you overcome that? Well, let me be more direct. How did you overcome the fear of ridicule or somebody calling you crazy? Because you have to cross the line.
Yeah, you do.
Yes.
Well, after a while, you have to say to yourself, what's more important, looking good or the truth?
Well, some would say looking good.
And well, there comes a while when you realize, one of the things that I realized, and that's that, and this might sound dramatic, but that's exactly one of the turning points for me. When you're looking at this whole phenomenon, what you're really talking about, let's get beyond government. Let's get beyond individual political agendas. What we're really looking at is the evolution of humanity. Okay? We are evolving, and whether or not we've had DNA manipulated by non-terrestrials, that's another subject. It could be a possibility, but the bottom line is this is the cutting edge of the evolution of humanity. When our consciousness now is going to go beyond anything we've ever known before, it is the most important step in our history.
Right, right.
And so I had to look at it from that standpoint and say, wait a minute, you didn't invite it. It's not going away. You're living two lives. And I worked in the legal field for years. I was living in a very cerebral, very conservative environment for many, many years. You don't discuss this. You don't talk about it. And then I've got my other life. But there comes a point you realize how important this is.
Well, I didn't want to mention this, but you're sort of mentioning it now. So I'm just going to say this for the listeners out there, and you can go to Nadine's website and see. But when you look, and please just understand what I'm trying to convey here. You look as conservative and as normal and as June Cleaver as it gets. Okay? And so, and I want everybody to understand, you're talking about this legal background, this conservative background. You have that image. And so for somebody like you coming, I mean, you don't fit, what other people in society would think is writing a book like this and has this type of experience. But then, so I think that would put people at ease too. It's just like, wow, wait a minute. Yeah. She looks like the teacher I had in third grade, and I'm listening to her.
I am conservative. But I'm very left brain, and I've got, I come from a very conservative Midwestern Michigan upbringing. I've lived a very basic life, and this does not fit my agenda. But I wasn't asked.
That must help when you're speaking to a room full of people about your experiences. That must put them at ease. At least, you know what I mean? You don't, like I said, you don't fit that normal.
And you hear things so many times. Well, they're doing this for attention. Give me a break.
You don't need to.
Right. It's not to say that there aren't elements within any cutting-edge new phenomenon that's being exposed. Yeah, there's going to be people. There's going to be people who have emotional problems, people who have mental problems. But, quite frankly, as I stepped out into this just about 10 years ago and started talking about it, I didn't know what I was going to run into.
Right.
Okay? I was flabbergasted because I didn't find what I thought I was going to find. The number of woo-woo people that were actually deeply involved, engrossed in studying this, researching, and standing up and talking about it, there were very few people that I ever saw or ever met that I would consider imbalanced, woo-woo. Most of them were bright, intelligent, curious, well-educated, researchers and people, credible, highly credible people.
And
so as I began to see that, I was more and more willing to stand up also with the crowd.
Well, and you brought up a great point, and then you know what, I would like you to tell your story, but no, you know what, we don't even have to go there. It's just a conversation. but you raise a really good point, and I think that anybody out there that has had any type of experience like yours, or think that they have, to be comfortable in stepping forward and talking, because you bring up the point that you want attention, and with that, the next thing is you're doing this for money. You're doing this for and I don't think that the next thing that you found in this was that you suddenly had $1 million in the bank from all of your.
It's somebody. I have a Facebook page where I do a lot of. It's an opportunity for me to do a lot of have a voice and really exercise it. And every now and then you'll see people making comments about, especially when you're an indie publisher, and they'll say, "Well, you're doing this because you want to sell books. You're going to make books." Wait a minute. Unless you've written a book, unless you've promoted yourself, unless you have walked that path, you have no idea what you're talking about. The amount of time, energy, money, resources, the commitment that it takes, the investment it takes to produce one book, to stand up and address issues, whether it's online, whether it's Facebook, or creating your websites, it absorbs your life. You don't even begin to cover your costs. Are you kidding me? I think Stephen made a point of it. You don't do this for money.
You don't.
It's nothing to do with money.
That's right.
This becomes a cause. This is something you believe in. This is something you stand up for. This is something you have to stand up for. After a while, you become educated enough about any vital subject. And once you have enough education, you can't turn it off. It transforms you into something else, and you step up to the line. If you have any personal integrity and commitment to humanity at large, you're going to step up to the line. You have to.
Well,
you can't forget.
No, and the easy thing, and it's funny because this conversation or this point comes up time after time after time, whether it's on this show or just in general when I'm talking to people out there about the subject, is the easy thing for a debunker or a skeptic to do is to immediately go to that angle. Oh, you're doing this because you want to write a book. You're doing this because you need attention. And the difficult things for them to answer are all the other points that you just brought up. Address those, debunker guy. It's not about the money. What about A, B, C, D, E, and F?
You know what? There's two kinds of attention. One is called positive attention. One is called negative attention. There are people in the world who seek negative attention out of desperate measures. Identity issues, whatever it might be, yes. But really? Do you mean to tell me? I write a lot of things. I do a lot of other things besides this, okay? I am a writer, and I'm promoting other books, and I write in other areas, okay? Psychology is one of them. I work in healing and recovery areas and different things. I write children's books also, okay? Now, one of the things I have to stand up and say is my credibility as a writer in the other areas that I write is going to be blown by standing up. So attention has nothing to do with it. This is risky in every way, shape, and form. Strangely enough, what else happens for most people who stand up and start to talk about contact they've had with non-human entities, their family doesn't want to hear. They can't tell mom, dad, sister, brother.
Right.
They're not going to want to. Their husband or wife generally is not going to be interested.
Right.
And the last people on the earth that are going to want to hear what they have to say are their friends. Honestly and truly, you know who listens to me speak or talk? Strangers. The closest people to me don't want to hear it. And the reason is that especially if somebody knows you to be conservative and credible, Okay?
Right.
And then, and then you stand up and you share this. You rock their reality.
Right.
You shake them to the core. If it comes from some woo-woo person, that's great. But if it comes from your close friend that you've known for 30 years and that person is telling you this happened to him,
right.
and you know this person,
right.
well, you got to listen.
You have
so
to.
They can't listen if they're not prepared for that evolution.
So, and
so
I'm not being facetious, and I'm not trying to be funny. Is what I want to say. But when you're sitting, you're going over to the in-laws, right? Whatever, Thanksgiving, Christmas dinner, and you guys are sitting around the table. You're saying this subject just doesn't come up.
Never. that would never come up. No, I do not discuss this issue with people close in my life.
What if they brought it up?
I do what I do, and if they want to take a peek at it, they'll step in and look.
Right.
99% of the time, it never comes up. It's never discussed. It's a part of my life that people close up to me are generally not that interested in.
Okay,
but you want to hear about Sedona?
Well, but yes, and that's not what I was. Slow down, Nadine. We got all night. Is what if one of your relatives brings it up with you? Do you just what? Let's not do it.
Oh no, I would discuss it.
You would.
I think it's like this: is that you have to be respectful of those people.
Right.
You have to. All right. For example, the reason I'm talking back to Sedona is that it took me 15 years to talk about it.
Right.
In 15 years, I told one person.
Right.
And that was the person who was present during the original experience.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It took 15 years for me to be willing to, excuse the pun, step out of the closet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So how could I expect anyone else? Now, it happened to me, which made it even more difficult.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
All right, because you can't deny it and run from it. But I try to be very patient. So if someone is to bring it up to me and they bring the subject up, how's that going? How's that book? Whatever this. Gentle and careful. Because you have to, I'm big on personal respect and respecting people's boundaries. Very important to me. And someone's emotional and psychological boundary is just as important as their physical boundary. It affects people deeply. So I know what it took for me to wrap my head around this and to start to move out, okay? So somebody brings it up to me. What you do is you drop a little bit of information. You stop.
Mm.
You see if they digest it.
Right.
You see that them go, either there's a sparkle in their eye and there might be another question, you move forward.
Right.
If there's not, if their eyes glaze over, you're done.
Right, right.
I never impose myself on anyone. I don't do that.
Well, I've told the story so many times now in the last couple of months since sitting in for art, but in the previous, I'm just going to guess here and say the previous 18 years, 17 years before that, I never told. I photographed a UFO. I photographed it, and I told in those 17 years before this show, 2 people, 3 people. That's it, And
there you go. That's the case. That's exactly what I'm saying.
now, probably 1 million people have heard the story, but it's just that I feel and I understand when I want people to understand that if you've had an experience, it's okay, I guess, because that's the way that I dealt with it, not to talk about it because everybody's different. But if you need to talk about it, talk. If you need to get it out, it's okay. Go talk to somebody and tell them exactly what's going on and what has happened. But
you want to talk to a receptive person.
That's what I'm.
Talk to somebody who lacks compassion and they do not have the flexibility to take in your story without judgment. You get pretty battered. You can get pretty battered.
Right, right.
And it's difficult enough if you're an experiencer, period, having to deal with it. Let alone take that story to somebody else and have them, negate you.
Well, okay. Now this is a good segue into Sedona. So you told somebody the first time You know, there was that one singular event where you turned to somebody and told somebody the story.
Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's start there. Well, how'd you do it, and what did you say?
Well, it was a cousin of mine, actually, and I'd been going through another period of a lot of activity, and I don't recall exactly why we were together. We were sharing some time together, and I opened the door a little bit. That was the first person I tested it with, other than my original friend who had been with me.
Mm-hmm.
And I told her I'd had something happen to me, something pretty dramatic and life-changing happened to me in Sedona, in the Red Rocks of Sedona, in the middle of the night one time. And we got probably, initially at that time, we might have gotten, I don't know, we might have had 5 minutes of a conversation. And quite frankly, although she's been aware of it, we've really had no conversation over all those years since that came out.
And how many years between the event and this conversation? How many years passed?
The experience happened in June of '91.
Right.
And so it would have been, it was 2004 when I began to talk about it.
So 12, 13 years. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So what? Okay. So you're talking, and what did you say?
Right. So I'm on a trip in Sedona with a girlfriend, longtime friend. We decided to drive from Southern California to Sedona. We're going to do some camping. We've got a van, a Toyota van, and we drive to Sedona, and we're on the first day out. We've been driving probably 7 hours. We're coming across 40, across the Highway 40 from California, and we are entering Sedona from the north. And coming down, it's a lot of switchbacks as you're coming down.
Right.
And we're exhausted, and we decide that we're going to pull over somewhere, and it's pitch black where we're at, and it's just a 2-lane highway, and it's no traffic anywhere, and we're in the boonies big time.
And everybody, I'm just going to paint a little picture. This is some serious high, dry desert, crazy part of the world where there's nothing there, really.
No, just rocks and forest, and it's very steep. You're coming down a real high. I don't know if the altitude is there. It's probably, the elevation might be, at that point, we're probably about 6,000, 6,500. Right. We're coming down to the Sedona area, so it's pretty steep. It's like a 6% incline coming down. And anyway, pitch black. Of course, stars are out. You've got no lights anywhere. And you're really on the boonies. Mm-hmm. So we finally see this area on the right, and we're exhausted. We decide to pull over. And the area looks like it's a small loop off of the road. It's got an entrance and an exit, and you drive into it, and it's just a dirt road. And along the dirt road, it's a very primitive kind of camping area.
Okay.
No electricity, nothing like that. There is an outhouse somewhere at the end, and it might be able to hold maybe 10 parking places. But again, it's just a dirt road. You've got a couple of stakes in the ground for each one, marking it with a number. So I don't know whether or not I believe it's a state day park or something.
Couple picnic tables and stuff like that.
Yeah, there are a few picnic tables.
Right.
There's some of them have like a little area where you can build a fire. That's it. No electricity, no anything else, and no hookups for water or anything. But we pull in with a van. We unpack because there's no one around for miles, so we're not at all concerned about our belongings. We take everything out of the van because we're going to sleep in the back of the van. So all of our camping equipment and our food, and there was like Coleman lanterns and a stove and the chairs and all of our backpacks with our clothes in it. Everything went out on the table,
mm-hmm.
and I had a creepy feeling. I remember telling her, and we all had this feeling from some time or another where you feel like you're being watched. And it was illogical, and I don't like illogical things. So I just had to soothe myself and say, come on. And I had mentioned to her, my friend's name was Pamela. We'd been friends at that point probably 20 years. And I said, I feel really strange, like we're being watched. And, of course, there's nothing anywhere.
There's nothing. No cars have gone by. Nothing like that.
No. Oh, no. No, it's late at night. It's like 9 o'clock at night. And, of course, there's no cars. Nobody is in this rustic area either, in these 10 areas.
Right.
It's very small. There's nobody parked in these areas. There's no traffic on the road, up on the road, and there's no light. And we're talking, it's a very rustic and empty area there. When there's a creek that runs down. There's a creek. We could hear a little bit of the creek in the background, and it ran down the hill some. And it's one of the major creeks that run through that gorge through there. And there's things like juniper there, and there's some other taller trees. I think sycamore trees and junipers in there, and high red rock mountains around you. Anyway, I mentioned that to her, and I said, "Wow, I feel like we're being watched." And of course, we're not. All of our belongings are on this outside of the van. We've got 2 sleeping bags laid down on the back of the van, and I go to bed first, and she's sitting outside for a little while. We had a couple of chairs we've thrown out, folding chairs. I go to bed first, lay down in my sleeping bag, and then I wake up a little bit, and I hear she's gotten in, and she's laying down in her sleeping bag. We're all locked up in the van. It's got one of these Toyota vans, the back rear end, like a lot of SUVs, it opens straight up and out. So, fall asleep, and I wake up sometime later. And I'm guessing she comes probably to bed around 11 o'clock and lays down, and it's probably no more than an hour later, something like that. And I hear a sound on the side of the van, like someone's out there. And I sit up, and it's a very curious sound. It's like a clicking sound I'm hearing on the side of the van, and some rustling and clicking. So I sit up, I'm alert, I'm wide awake and sitting up and listening. All of a sudden, the light goes out in the van. And, of course, I'm in pitch black, so it fries my eyes. The light floods my eyes. I can barely see anything. And as I begin to get my vision, I see an arm reaching in towards me from the back of the van.
The door was open?
The door's open.
Okay.
Someone has opened up the back door of the van.
And the light is coming from the front?
The light is coming from, when you open up any of the doors in a car or a vehicle, your light will go on.
I got you. Okay.
The overhead light came on.
Right.
And this hand is reaching in for me. And I'm, trying to get my vision because I've gone from pitch black to bright light. And I'm looking at this hand as it's reaching towards me.
What does the hand look like?
That's the problem, okay? The hand is kind of pasty white, very skinny, long arm, but there's only 3 fingers and a thumb. And on the end of the fingers, there's a little depression that almost looks like, sort of like a little suction cup on the ends of the fingers.
And you can
3 fingers and a thumb.
And you can see all of this.
And my mind sees this thing, and when that kind of a thing happens, there is a shock quality, a mental and emotional shock quality to it. And all I could keep thinking is 3 fingers and a thumb? 3 fingers and a thumb? What's going on? 3 fingers and a thumb. Because I've never seen such a thing before. I've never thought about such a thing before. Anyway, the next thing, I have a few seconds of like a blackout, sort of like. And the next conscious awareness that I have is I'm standing at the end of the van. And the doors above me, it's still swung open, and I'm now standing at the end of the van.
Outside of the van?
Outside, and I am barefoot, and I'm paralyzed. I can't move. I cannot raise my head, but my eyes are open. I can see fine, but I can't raise my head enough to get a full vision of what's going on because my body is stiff as a board. I cannot move. But what I can see is I have a side vision down and to the left and to the right of me. I do have that. And with that vision, I can see on each side of me there is a small little person, if you will, with no hair.
Where is your friend?
Out cold.
She's still in the van sleeping. Can you see her from where you are?
No, I cannot.
Okay.
I cannot. I'm assuming she was out cold during that event. We've certainly talked about this, and she has no recollection of even waking up. And she, when I was returned to the van also, she was in the same position. To my knowledge, she had never woken up.
Okay.
And there was some kind of, something had been done to her to keep her unconscious, I'm sure. Anyway, the next memory I have is I'm standing there, and I feel as though there is somebody very tall standing in front of me, but I can't see him because I can't raise my head. And although there's light spewing out around me from behind, the open vehicle, still pitch black out there around the edge. So I see these two characters on either side of me, and then I feel myself lift up off the ground.
Well, are you saying that you wanted to raise your head, but you couldn't?
Correct.
Oh, that is creepy.
Yes.
I can't imagine.
Well, yeah, I couldn't move my body at all.
The terror of that type of paralysis.
And adrenaline, of course, is pouring through your body.
Right.
And you want, I like logical thinking. So I'm trying to find, and somewhere, some part of you, you're terrorized on one degree, but another part of you is just desperate for an answer, for a solution, for some kind of explanation, logical that you will accept. And it's all happening and just flashing through your mind. Anyway, I feel myself raise up off the ground. And if I was to judge how far, I'd say 5 or 6 inches off the ground. And by my view, what I can see is that each of these two characters, one on each side of me, had put their hand underneath my hand, but they were not touching me. My arms were straight at my sides, and my hands were hanging straight. They put their little hands, with 3 fingers and a thumb, they put them, cupped them underneath where my hands were at the sides of my body.
I got you.
In doing so, they raised me up. I raised up. Then we began to move forward very slowly. We began to move forward. I still couldn't move my head. And I could see off farther to the side that there were more of these small beings.
How many?
I can only say, I can't tell you how many, but I can tell you, I would say, as far as I could see the faces of a number of them gathered around, maybe another half a dozen.
Were you scared? Well, of course you were scared, but I want to know how scared you were, because you must have been terrified. But were you at that point? Did you think maybe you were dreaming? That maybe this.
No.
Okay,
no.
So you were fully you realized that this is absolutely real. You were wide awake.
Well, yeah.
This is going down. Wow,
yeah.
That must have been terrifying. Okay, so how scared
were you? It was terrifying, but also remember that the ETs do, and I understand this now after many years, many years of experience and facing it and really looking at my experiences. You recognize, and of course later on I began to have some information from other people with similar experiences, and the bottom line is they do things to you to help you to forget. They do not want you to remember. They want to pacify you. They want to anesthetize you in some way that they can, so that you'll be more, you can be manipulated. Bottom line. So ultimately, as we begin to move forward, I see a few on each side of me. I could see, never could see the person or the entity in front of me, but then I begin to feel something hitting my face. I can't move, but something's slapping my face left and right, here and there, as we're moving forward.
Like a hand slapping you?
No, I didn't know what it was at the time.
Okay.
I didn't know. Then the next thing that I can see, because it's so brilliant, I can see a light that we're moving towards, a very, very brilliant light. I can't raise my head. I don't know what's up there, but I see a very, very brilliant light is emanating towards us from the direction where we're moving.
Right, and you're not walking. You're above the ground, and your legs are still. You're floating. Yes. They're carrying you.
My body's stiff. I'm upright, and they're moving me forward through some mechanism.
Interesting.
All right, so that's it, okay? The next thing, that's it for my memory. The next thing that happens, I experience this feeling of falling and this loud whoosh sound, and I'm dropped with my legs folded, believe it or not, in front of me. My legs are folded in front of me, and it's as though I dropped from the air like a foot, and boom, hit the top of my sleeping bag. I'm outside of the sleeping bag, but that's my next recollection, fully awake, boom, and I hit my sleeping bag. I'm inside the van. And it was as though I dropped from a height from somewhere, and boom, I'm inside the van. And I'm sitting upright, okay, fully awake, fully conscious, and fully hysterical.
So you're saying the height that you're inside the van, you can only fall a little bit, but you're saying that you fell a great distance, like through the roof of the van.
Yes, that's what it felt like.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes, like I was returned in some unusual manner. Yes. Anyway, I'm fully awake, and my body's full of adrenaline. I'm drenched in sweat. I've never experienced that degree of terror in my life. And the fear that I had, the overwhelming fear, was that they weren't done with me and they were coming back.
Of course.
They weren't done with me and they were coming back.
That had to be your next, that was your next thought. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was it. And I was sobbing and crying hysterically. My mind was, what just happened? Oh my God, this can't be real. Oh my God.
Well, okay, so the question that I have, which is every listener out there is wanting to ask this question, so I'll ask it for them. Did you remember everything at that moment? Did you remember being carried away?
Yeah. Oh, yes, everything right away. What I shared with you was fully in my consciousness, but there were two blank spaces, two blank moments. From when the hand actually grabbed me, those few seconds, and pulled me into the standing position, I didn't have that. And from wherever they took me, towards that light. Okay? So wherever they took me to the light and then returned me to the van, that was a blank moment. Did
your friend wake up?
No, she never woke up. Well, it became very disturbing on top of disturbing when, because I shook her, called to her, cried to her.
Of course.
Pamela, wake up, wake up. Nothing I did. I pulled the covers back over. I shook her body. I was making noise. I was making a lot of noise. I was crying hard. I was shattered. I had to talk. I wanted to share with her. I wanted to talk to her. I was just inconsolable. I didn't know what to do with this, but she wouldn't wake up. So I pressed there was no way. I gave up, and I pressed my face it was probably somewhere around 3:30, 3:45 in the morning. I was terrorized. They were coming back.
Did you look out the window?
So I pressed my face to the window, and I sat there, waiting, terrified.
I don't know if I would have looked.
Well, I was scared to death. I wanted to know they were coming. I wanted to see it. I wasn't going to put my head under the covers.
Did you pick up a weapon? Did you pick up a...
No.
Okay.
My eyes were rolled wide open. I was pressed with my face against the window watching. That was it.
Right.
I don't know what I thought I was going to do if they came back. Until the dawn came, the dawn came somewhere around an hour later. It was getting light at 5 o'clock. I think it was July then. And so ultimately, the light comes, and, I'm not afraid then. She wakes up, no problem, no consciousness of anything ever happening, no awareness of me being taken out of the van. We get up, we talk about it. I don't give her a lot of detail except to say something happened to me. Something terrible happened to me last night.
Oh, you left the E.T. part out of the conversation?
I said, I feel like somebody took me out of the van. Something bad happened.
Okay.
Well, once we went outside, then I got the icing on the cake, which made it even greater. Is once we went outside, it took me only a couple of minutes to realize that all of my personal belongings were gone. Only mine. Hers were there. I mean, everything was gone, straight down to my towel, my backpack, my tennis shoes. Anything that had been mine was gone. All of hers was there. All of the camping equipment was there. All the food was there. Anything that had value was still there. Like, we had nice Coleman lanterns and material there. Why wouldn't you take that if there was a human being doing this? Anyway, my stuff was gone, and we searched the area. We searched the area high and low and never found a trace of any of my belongings. So that ended our trip. We went back home. And after that, a very strange obsession grew in me. And I had a lot of trouble. I had trouble sleeping. I had a great deal of difficulty coping with this. And anyway, within 6 months, I didn't share this with anyone, but within 6 months, I was possessed with this desire to move to the Southwest from California. And so I bought a ticket one day, the following December, hopped on a plane, flew to New Mexico, to Santa Fe, New Mexico, and just altered my life dramatically. And I moved myself out into the outskirts of Santa Fe, New Mexico, another very remote area, something I'd never done in my life before. Never.
When you say obsession, was it did city life here in Southern California, was that like was it boring or stupid? And like
No. I worked for a law firm.
Right,
no, I worked
right.
For a law firm. I had a regular life.
What was drawing you? What was the...
Good question. Now, I certainly liked the Southwest, but I had no plans of doing that. None. But after this experience, I'm buying this ticket, I'm flying out. Now, I don't know anybody in New Mexico, not a soul.
Right.
It's not like I knew somebody there.
Right.
I knew nobody. Got a plane, stayed there for the weekend, 3 or 4 days, went back home, packed up, sold everything, and in 7 weeks, I moved to Santa Fe. Now, at that time, I didn't own a home, which made it easier, but in 7 weeks, everybody said, where are you going? I don't know, gotta go. Where are you going? Don't know, gotta go.
Right.
Well, what ends up happening as soon as I moved to Santa Fe is that the experiences dramatically escalated.
Of course.
I moved into a whole different experience of living with 2 lives, my regular life and the hidden life. And that's when it went full bore.
What did you do? What was your occupation in Santa Fe? Was it the same as here?
I did the same thing for 25 years.
Right.
I was a litigation assistant.
Okay.
So I was working with attorneys and law firms as a paralegal, and I was preparing cases for trial. I did a lot of, evidence preparation. I did court documents and filed them with state and, federal courts and pretty,
And they have to
dry stuff.
Well, they have to litigate in Santa Fe too, so.
Oh yeah, well that was I could go into law everywhere. I've worked in 4 different states in law.
So did any of the attorneys that you worked for, did you expose them to this second lifestyle?
Well, there's a funny thing. Many years later, I was working for I worked for a firm. The last firm I worked for was 10 years in Orange County. I had one of the attorneys I worked with was extremely curious. Somehow he'd seen something about me on the internet, and by then I had Alien Experiences Book 1 had been published, and he came to me and asked me for it, and asked me if he could buy a copy of it, and I said absolutely not. I wasn't gonna. I did not want to bring the 2 lives together.
Right.
He certainly showed an interest. Well, of course, eventually that book was on Kindle, and so at some point later on, he went ahead, and I know he bought it on Kindle, and he alluded to that, but I never would sit down and really discuss it. We just had a few very brief conversations later about it, but certainly through the years, no, I would never, ever bring this into my career. Never.
So what happened next? So it's 7 weeks later, you move to Santa Fe, you get a job. Did anything happen? Well, what was the first experience when you moved back? What happened next?
I noticed that some of my behavior began to change, and there were fears present that had never been there before. I had a feeling of being watched. I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I would be certain that there was someone in my room. Now, this is nothing I'd ever gone through before. I would get an impulse that would come out of nowhere. It could be midnight to get in my car and drive out into a remote area.
And this never happened in California?
No, never, ever. Nothing like that ever happened. Oh, God, no.
Yeah, so...
I would have missing time, suddenly.
Right.
And in missing time, I might find myself waking up in a strange position in another part of the house.
Did you contact did you contact MUFON or any other organization, or were you just like going it alone?
Well, initially, I was going it alone for a long time. But what I did when I moved to Santa Fe is I sought out a psychotherapist.
Right.
What I really wanted is I wanted somebody to tell me that this was some kind of hallucination or a psychological condition that I previously was unaware of, that I was suffering. There'd be a label for it. Okay, you've got some kind of psychosis related to this or that, or there is a thing called, now there are some people that refer to, also there is a condition referred to as sleep paralysis, which is a joke, ultimately, when you're having these experiences, and I explored that too. Could I be suffering sleep paralysis? Oh, please. Anyway, I was hoping to find some kind of medical, logical explanation. I wanted it to go away. I wanted it to be something that I could live with, that I could identify, that was logical, that I could just set it aside, put it in its place. So I contacted a psychotherapist, and I didn't tell her anything about the experience at all. I just told her something happened to me on this date and time. It was bothering me. She attempted 2 times, on 2 occasions, to put me under hypnosis.
Uh-huh.
And obviously, I'm there. I want something from her. I want a logical explanation so I can just go on with my life.
Right.
But what happens, that isn't what happens. Under hypnosis, she gives me paper and pens, and she has me start to talk about the event and draw pictures from the event, and then we get to a place. What happens is that we get to that place where there's a light, and I can see this light ahead of me. And under regression hypnosis, the story is the exact same as what I recall. There was nothing that was different whatsoever.
Leading up to the light.
Right, identical.
Right.
But when the light thing comes, what was hitting my face was branches, because we were moving through a path through the woods. And what was in front of us was a landed craft. And that's where the light was emanating from. And as we progressed through it, as we went through it, we actually got to the craft under hypnosis. You couldn't see a door. It was like a saucer-type craft, not that large, but it opened up. It just suddenly opens up. I was taken inside. And we got straight to a point where they're putting me on a table, and my hysteria was off the chart. And she was afraid for me because I was screaming so loud under hypnosis, flailing my arms and legs. She stopped. And I came back on one other occasion, like a week or 10 days after that, and we tried it one more time, and she was afraid to move me through it because my hysteria was just off the chart.
How many pictures did you draw? Were you drawing like a madman or not?
At the time, I probably had, she had a notebook, a large notebook of blank paper, and there was drawings of the of the entities themselves, drawing of the craft, drawing of the examination table. And there came a point after that when, after the second time I saw her, I almost gave up hope. I didn't know what to do. And, you know, there was a thing, and this is something, psychology has been one of my, human psychology has been one of my favorite subjects for years. And when people are traumatized, whatever that trauma might be, in order to survive through it, oftentimes they disassociate. They focus on something else to take the pain away, the fear away, whatever it is, in order to survive. Now, all of the memories are still stored. They're still stored in your subconscious mind. It's all in there. But you have to find a way to live with it. So the way I began to live with this, when I realized I couldn't find my way out, and have always been a writer and kept journals. So the place that I found my personal power back, a certain measure of control, because you want control, because you're talking about being victimized here.
Mm-hmm,
This is the ultimate victimhood, which I'm not a very good victim, okay? And so the way I found my release was through diary. What I determined is that whatever was going to happen to me, I was going to record in journals every single piece of memory and information that I could possibly record until, as time would go on, that I would be able to unravel this mystery.
Were you able to do this without regression? Were you able to get to these memories on your own, or how did you? One of
the things that I did, the human mind has always fascinated me. Psychology has fascinated me, and the physiology of the brain has fascinated me. How we store memory, and so it's been a subject of of interest for me for a long time. And for example, years before I used to go to the University of Ann Arbor in Michigan. I lived in Michigan, and this had nothing to do with ETs whatsoever, just my fascination with learning, accelerated learning, the human mind. It was a fascination of mine. And I would go to University of Ann Arbor had what they call sensory deprivation tanks. And you go in, and so there's methods of relaxation where you go into these tanks, these really advanced tanks at the university, and they have them all over. But you go into these tanks where you lie in water where 500 pounds of Epsom salt has been dissolved in the tank, and you float.
Right.
And essentially, it is a way of raising endorphins. They use some of these techniques for help in raising endorphins with people who are suffering chronic pain. But the thing they really found with it is they found that it accelerates learning and perception.
I've heard that, yes.
You isolate a lot of the other activity going on in the brain, and that's what you're doing when you're doing, of course, your isolation tanks. You're getting rid of sound, you're getting rid of light, and they found that when you're in these tanks, after a while, it's 98.6 is the temperature of the salt water. Now, first of all, you have no gravity because you're totally floating.
You're totally floating, and no muscles are straining, nothing. You are completely suspended.
Exactly.
Weightless.
And the body temperature is the exact the water temperature is the same as your body. So as you float there for a while, give you 10, 15 minutes, you cannot tell where your body begins and the water ends. You can't tell anymore. So what I did that kind of thing, that kind of training. I did neurolinguistic classes and training. Another one of the things I got involved with sound and light machines, and they are for relaxation, for tapping different parts of your brain, for improving your memory and your perception. And there's one of the computers that I have has got 50 programs on it. So it's almost like brain exercising. Now, I can only guess that because I had done that previously, I have a greater capacity for visualization and memory, conscious memory, perception, than maybe the average person might be, because that had been a big part of my life, brain exercising, if you'll call it that.
Sure.
Okay? And of course, let me tell you this, and this is important. I don't drink alcohol. I don't do any drugs. I do nothing that's mind-altering. Haven't touched anything, even a drink, since I was in my mid-20s. And I'm 61. Okay? Nothing. So I'm not into altering my consciousness. I love my consciousness. But I can only assume that has given me the ability to have the degree of conscious memory and clarity. So what would happen when I would come back from an experience, I learned to keep my notebooks close, and I would record every single possible detail that I could of my experience, whatever that might have been. And one thing I recognized early on, and I think it's real important, one of the things that sometimes makes me uncomfortable is when experiencers, contactees, abductees, whatever you want to call them, they talk about their experiences without clearly defining the state of consciousness that they are in at the time it's happening. Because the ETs do everything they can to alter you, to subdue you, and they try to alter your perception. So it's a strain. When one of these events begins, And I consider myself very mentally strong and emotionally strong, especially over all these years working with this. You know, you're not going to stay fully conscious through the whole event. It is not going to happen. Let alone when you're terrified, it's not going to happen. But even after years of having these experiences and working very hard to stay as conscious and present, and you tell yourself, I'm going to remember as much detail as I can. I'm going to try to see as much. Even then, maybe you're going to get 10 minutes of it. Then after that, you might get pieces where you come out of this state and you could see something, and it's like a puzzle, and you get a piece of it. Okay, and you record that, but then they take you down under again, and you lose it again. Then you come back out.
Right.
You get fragments.
Do you get scared? Does when? And in a second, I'm going to have you take us, through the craft, and I want you to tell us a little bit about that. But when you relive the story and you're writing it down, or maybe even telling it, like you're going to talk about it here in a few minutes, do you relive it? Do you get scared again, or were you even scared at the time? We haven't even gotten that far.
Well, again, when you're talking about a whole shift in reality.
Right.
Okay, with no preparation. So basically, for almost 15 years, I lived this life alone with recording my experiences, and periodically I would share with my friend Pamela, who was with me. She believed me 100%. Eventually, she knows the story.
Mm-hmm.
And she was my only ally, the only person I would talk to that I knew would never judge me. At the time, she belonged to an organization started by George Adamski, and it was, and he was on the forefront. This was in the 50s. I'm trying to think of what that organization was. And he was located in Los Angeles, and she actually later on became a part of that. So it was she had a nature that said, yeah, I really believe this is possible, and I do believe the ETs are here.
She never had an experience herself. She was just open-minded. Right.
No, she was just very open-minded. So she was my outlet through the years and my journals.
Okay, so we've got about 45 minutes left. Seems like a lot of time. We're going to run out, I guarantee it. But take me to I want to know the light. So you're coming up to the light, and now your memories, you're able to access this, and you can see this table. Just take me to that point. What happens next? And are you scared? Are you relaxed? Are they making you feel at ease? Are they scaring the crap out of you? I mean, what is happening?
I'm terrified.
Right.
Terrified to the core. This is my first experience. Now, years later, I realized this was happening also through my childhood. I was not capable of accepting it, and I had no conscious memories. Later on, I realized that this was something that was happening to me before that time. I didn't know it. Anyway, what ends up happening is I go into the craft, and I look across, and the room looks like the room is round. It looks almost like you've got two bowls, one on top of the other, and there's almost like a seam around the center of the room.
Okay.
There's light all over. It's a very dim, soft light. You can't tell where it's coming from. And I see on the other side of the room there is a very, very tall, white, very pale, pasty white ET standing there that had to be like 8 or 9 feet tall. Well, let's say 7 or 8 feet tall, maybe. But his head was shaped very strange, very stern, very cold, absolutely no emotion on his face. It was a humanoid, of course, wearing some kind of almost like a tunic, kind of.
Okay.
A light-colored tunic. And he was standing in front of what looked like kind of a lighted control panel. And standing in front of him, between me and him, and I say him, I don't know how we know these are males and females, but we always seem to know.
Right, that was my next question. How did you know? Okay.
We always seem to know. It's hard to explain. Even in the small ETs, the grays, you know. Okay. Anyway, and in front of them is a pedestal table that looks almost like, it would almost look like a slab in the morgue. It looks like stainless steel. It's coming from a pedestal at the bottom. It's very thick. The width of it is probably 8 inches thick. It may be 6.5 feet long, 4 feet wide. There's some kind of apparatus hanging from the ceiling over the top of it. And I come in, and I look at that, and I have these others around me, and there's this other tall person, and mind you, and now my head is actually moving forward. By the time I go in, I can raise my neck up. I can't see the person that was in front of me. He's not there anymore. All the small ones are around me, several of them. But I look at that table. I'm going on the table.
Right, of course.
I know they're going to put me on the table.
And you're still floating, right?
I'm still moving across the floor.
Right.
And utterly, completely horrified that I know I'm going on that table.
Right.
Okay. Now,
just I want. There's nothing you can do to change the situation.
No.
You know, it's inevitable. You can't control your body. You're floating. You're not walking. You can't really move. They're in control of what is going on, and that table is there for a reason, and there's nothing you can do about it. That must have been horrifying. I just don't know.
It's off the chart disgusting. And one of the things with me is it was interesting in doing the book with Barbara Lamb years later. I met Barbara Lamb, and Barbara Lamb, of course, is a very well-known UFO ET researcher. She works with experiencers all the time, 1,000 of them. And but she has encountered through her work, and she's also a bona fide psychotherapist besides a hypnotherapist, which is a wonderful combination. She has encountered and dealt with contactees, abductees, who have had positive experiences. They see what I later on learned they refer to as the Nordics, blonde, kind of muscular, more normal-looking human-type ETs that are spiritual, all of that. Well, she had a lot of that in her experience and people she'd worked with, and she's very fascinated by that. Wasn't my experience at all. So that was interesting coming together on the book, because I had to come to a point and realize that, let's face it, if we look at this planet, look at planet Earth, how many species do we have on the face of this planet and in the water? How many?
A lot.
Millions.
Yeah.
Right?
A lot, yeah.
Now, a principle either is or it isn't. And I believe in the overall principle that we live in the field of infinite consciousness, call it God, but that there's love and there's infinite intelligence there and creativity, okay? I'm a part of that. They're a part of it. There are principles that either are or they're not. And generally, if there is a principle, it works across the board. All right? So here you've got a planet like Earth with these just multiple species of every possible thing you could possibly imagine. They fly, they swim, they, breathe through the water. You name it, we've got it here. Now, with that, it's just one tiny, tiny, small fragment of the totality of the cosmos. We have to know that we've got a variety of species out there also, all kinds of species. So finally, I came to terms with the fact that although my experience has primarily been not real happy or positive, and I would have chosen not to do it. They haven't been particularly friendly, particularly nice. They have their own agenda. There very probably are a number of other species out there in the cosmos that could be spiritually evolved, that are developed, and I believe that. Why some of us attract a certain type or the other, I don't know. I believe it is family, and I believe our family line has been experimented upon. They grab family lines and they stay with it, again, just like we do on this planet, right?
Right.
We go into our laboratories, we start with a strain of white mice, we stay with the whole family, and we keep using them.
Right.
They do the same thing to us.
So you're saying you guys, and again, I'm not making fun of the situation, but you're saying you guys didn't exactly sing Kumbaya. You know, that's not what was going on, and they weren't there to make friends. Right.
We were collaborating on a very important project. Okay, And she is the one with a lot more experience than me. At the time, we began in 2004, and the book came out in 2008. And it took 3 years to write that book and to get it together between the two of us.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, you know, my awareness and my acceptance grew dynamically throughout that time. I had had no previous experience with listening to anybody's stories but my own. None of them.
Have you ever listened or have you ever talked to Travis Walton about your experience?
Not personally. I've met him, but I have not sat down and talked with him.
Okay, there's some similarities here, and you probably had never heard, especially up to this point, probably didn't know much about his.
Right.
But
before the book came out, what I did, and I think this is really important, is that I wanted to stay pure with my own information. So what I did is like in the book Alien Experiences, there's a chapter on Marie, and that's my story. Marie is my middle name, and I used kind of that as a pseudonym. And I went through all my dozens and dozens of diaries, all of my recollections, all of my recordings. As these experiences accelerated over the years, I even got to the point that I had so much information when I came back, I couldn't write fast enough, that I would take my hand recorder and record audio tapes of everything I could possibly remember, how it started, what I saw, what I experienced, you name it. I'd put it all on tape as fast as I could because there was so much. I'd be shaking. I'd grab this thing, but I'd get it off in there. I'd grab pieces of paper and I'd draw it out as fast as I could so I wouldn't lose it. I wanted to be fresh with it. But anyway, the important thing was I did not, until I had my story down, until all the information is, all of the collection of experiences, stories, my diaries, my recordings were all put together. Until that was down, I did not read one file, read anybody's book, watch any television programs, nothing, because I did not want to taint my experience. I wanted whatever I had to be pure. So suddenly, here we are finally, I take the other files. We've got 100 files, okay? And she hands me her 100 files to review so that I could see, and we could later on, collaborate which ones we were going to put in the book, what stories. So I took the 100 files. Now, at this point, I have not been exposed to anything. I've gone to a couple of MUFON meetings. I met her at a MUFON meeting.
Right.
I had seen the original E.T. Spielberg movie.
Right.
I knew very, very little, and I had not listened, gone to any conferences, nothing. But now my stuff is down. Now I'm going to go look and see what somebody else has experienced. Well, here I am in my living room late in these nights as I get home from the law firm, and I'm working on this book, and I'm reading these files of somebody else's experience. Now, for example, I have an experience in one occasion where I'm fully awake, walking around my bedroom at night, getting ready, brushing my teeth, and I see this big flash of white light outside my bedroom window, and I turn and I say, whoa, what's that? All of a sudden, it moves into my bedroom, okay? As it moves into my bedroom, it moves in and comes down from the ceiling and explodes into this shaft of white light. But what was interesting about it is here's this light, and it's got all these little tiny sparkles inside of the light, these little fragments that almost look like little blue sparkles.
Like glitter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And the light's kind of foggy. Anyway, that was the beginning of a very unique experience. But that light, in describing the light, okay, I've never told a soul. Barbara didn't know. Barbara hadn't even seen my notes. Nobody knew. Nobody. Now, I'm reading one of these files that she's collected and given to me with a vast amount of information. I'm reading about somebody in Australia in 1977 that has this ball of light come in this room. It explodes, and it turns into the shaft of light with these blue sparkles in it. Well, let me tell you, it was not easy for me. It was difficult because every step I took once I, quote-unquote, came out of the closet in 2004, and then in 2008, once we finished the book and I went through the rest of the files, nothing has happened that has ever said or denied my experience. Everything that has happened to me since then has only validated everything that's happened to me. And when you have those kind of things and you've suddenly got 6 people, 8 people describing a really unique situation.
Right.
In a different place in time and country, well, there came a point, and it was a process, where I surrendered. And in that surrender, I lost my fear. I said, well, if they were going to take you out, they're going to take you out by now. That's not their intention.
Right.
That's what this is about. And somewhere along the line, I matured to the point of accepting it. And then through the process, I accepted the fact there's a variety of ETs. I've seen 7 in my experience. And there's many, 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 many more out there, who knows. And yes, I do believe also by studying some of the cases that we did that there are a number of people who've had very positive healings, and they've encountered other species who have a completely different agenda. And again, let's take all our different countries. Let's look at politics. Every country, every political
absolutely yes
arena has their own agenda.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And lifestyle.
There are some out there that want to harm us. There are.
Sure.
And there are some that are looking out for us.
Well, do you feel that, I'm going to ask you a couple of I'm just going to ask direct questions. Do you feel that they are definitely alien? That come from another.
Good question.
Or.
I again, we're talking about multiplicity here. We're talking about a diverse cosmos where life forms, conscious life forms, are living in a variety of manners. Some in the 3rd dimension.
Right.
Some perhaps in the 4th dimension.
Exactly.
And some have shown me that they only use different dimensions strictly for travel. They're using in some of the dimensions in order to get from place to place. But they actually live in the 3rd dimension. But they found a way to traverse the cosmos through other dimensions, manipulating other dimensions. So, in response to that, a lot of them are, I do believe, yes, a lot of them are 3rd dimension, physical, as we know it, beings with real physical craft. Some of them, the event I just described where this ball of light, now I had a weird experience with that because now, you know what I did next when that ball of light came? It hits the floor. It bounces the shaft with its blue light. I jump in bed and pull the covers over my head. What? What? That is the most bizarre thing, So they have all kinds of ways of affecting us. But in that case, honestly, I've never seen these entities before. Never seen them since one time, and I joked to myself and called this a drive-by. What stepped out of that light were almost like light beings, and they know how to travel in light. Now, whether or not they're 3rd dimension or other, I would guess they do not live full-time in the 3rd dimension. They actually traveled through light, and they came out of that light beam.
Could you see through this being? Is that what you're saying? You could see through?
Yes, you could. You could see slightly through them, yes. And they were only interested in one thing, which was interesting. They were interested in my joints, the joints of my body, my ankles, my knees, my elbows, my shoulders, the way my body bent. There were 2 of them, one on each side, and they bent my arms back and forth. Now, at that point, I was not conscious. That is a memory. After they left, I sat up in bed, and that's what I remembered, and pulling back the covers and looking at my arms. Now, the thing at their body looked, instead of the way our knees bend, where our knee bends and our the bottom portion of our leg, our calves go to the back, theirs went the opposite direction. So their joints were very, very different in the lower half of their body. So their fascination with the human structure makes some sense in the way that they examined my legs and arms. They were not built that way.
Are you able to manipulate when you have an experience? Can you call out to them, or are you not in control of that? Are they totally?
Well,
who determines? Determines the experience? Agenda?
Well, I don't. Well, it is for this way. And the way you do. Okay. I believe there's 7 implants in my body. Okay? One of the things that they monitor, and I'm sure you've heard this from other experiencers, I learned this was not a singular event, but they're fascinated. Certainly the species that I have met are fascinated with our human makeup, with our emotional makeup. All right, that whole emotional dimension. And one way they control us because they know that we're violent. We're a terribly barbaric and violent race in general.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few of the souls on this planet that have evolved beyond that very small percentage where they can control that aggressive stance. But they're fascinated because their capacity for love is so amazing. Also, on the other end of the scale. So we are really amazing creatures. You know, we haven't learned how to master our emotional side yet in our evolution. But it's really quite fascinating, that part of us. And many of them do not have that dimension to their being.
Right.
And they're fascinated. So one of the things is when you have a strong event take place in your life and you are generating, now emotion generates some type of vibration in the environment. I do believe that. And there's a lot of that talk these days in quantum physics about, you know, it's sort of like that we really manifest our universe, and the power behind it is the power of the emotion. And one of the things here is that if you experience a dynamic emotional event, for example, when my father died, they came that night. After my mother died, they came that night.
Oh, the same species?
Yes, there's a basic number of species that have worked with me mainly throughout the years.
Okay.
And they monitor your emotional makeup, and they have a way that, however these implants work, they monitor you. So that is something that will be a precursor to an event. Other than that, there's only been one occasion where I went outside at night one night. I was angry, actually. I've had moments of like, why me? You know, I don't want to deal with this. And one occasion I did call them out. And that night they did come. I never did it again. I wondered if it was possible.
Right. Now,
if I was having the angelic experiences with these lovely ETs, that'd be grand. That wasn't my experience.
Well, I almost forgot to ask this earlier, but this is a good spot. Is it when I understand the difference? Was it ever always the same person, same being? Did you ever see one a second time, or is it always a different entity altogether? It's just somebody you haven't met before. Or, do you know what I mean? Did you develop a relationship?
Am I seeing the same characters again and again?
Yes.
Well, I have seen 7 species that have interacted with me, and the only one that I have repeatedly seen, there are 2 that I've repeatedly seen. One is the tall white that seems to run the show, if you will. The tall white in the tunic that seems to be the orchestrator of examinations and gets the grades to do whatever they need.
Right.
I've seen that one several times. But there has been one reoccurring figure that has continually appeared in, not in the initial event, but as years progressed, he appeared. How I know it is a male, I don't know, but it's a male. And it's the only one I've ever seen. I didn't know what it was. I have a drawing of it in my book. And people refer to it as a praying mantis or an insectoid being. Probably one of the least, visually appealing characters. But, strangely enough, this one seems like he has repeatedly shown up in my events, and he does mental testing with the mind. With the mind, he does training, mental testing, emotional testing, and I have only seen one of this species ever, and it's the same one, and he's shown up over the years. And there's a number of experiences that I've had where we were involved and engaged at tables, sitting, using different types of equipment and memory devices and.
How are you communicating?
Telepathically.
Totally. Did any of with every species?
Every species.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
no vocal. And even there's only one experience where I actually spoke out loud. And other than that, I don't speak either.
What did you say?
What they want.
I have Nadine. What did you say when you said you spoke out loud?
It was a major turning point actually in my experiences, and this is a few years ago. Maybe I don't know, probably 4 or 5 years ago. I found myself in an experience, and sitting around this table with 3 or 4 different types of beings, and also about 4 other human beings sitting, and they were in semi-conscious stage with their head tilted forward. And I got an aha moment, and my aha moment was one of the things that happens here is when you're a victim of anything, you have a serious identity crisis and self-esteem issue. Your self-esteem spirals low, your sense of value spirals out, you don't feel valuable when somebody's victimizing you. It affects you over time, and you see yourself as less than. And they like to perpetrate that kind of impact. They want to keep us thinking that we're less. And this was an aha moment. In this collective environment, there were a number of species sitting at this table, and that one character was sitting across from me that I'm telling you about, this insectoid being. And it was an aha moment. And the aha moment was when I realized the truth. And that the truth was that instead, I'd always felt through these experiences that they saw us as lowly,
undeveloped
beings, lowly beings that were not very worthy, that had little worth, that were not that important. But of course, you always say to yourself, "Well, then why is there so much activity on the planet?
Right?
Why are so many coming here then?" Anyway, the aha moment is I sat there and I hollered out, because it was such a powerful moment for me. It was a turning point in my experiences when my aha moment said, wait a minute. They covet what we have. They're coming here, regardless of whether or not they have genetically altered us, some of the species, and I believe they may have. We have something they don't have.
And what is?
We have something, and that is the emotional dimension.
Oh.
I stood up and I went, I get it. You're afraid we have something you don't have. You want what we've got. You see this as something superior because you don't have it. So instead of seeing us, making us believe we're less than, in reality, we may be on the cutting edge of living evolution. Regardless of whether or not they genetically programmed it, we have something many of those species do not have. We have an emotional dimension. We have people that will do dynamic acts of heroism. They will give up their life. They will throw themselves in front of a speeding vehicle to save a child.
Mm-hmm.
The man will march off in war and he'll save his whole battalion by doing this selfless act of throwing himself on a grenade. We have the potential here in this race to go to unbelievable heights of development and spiritual development. They don't even come near. They don't have a range.
Well, you said
they don't have any of that.
You said earlier that they detected love.
Yes.
So, do you think that's
they
that's
detect,
part of?
No, they detect strong emotion.
Yeah, yes, because they
Not
lack it. Is
love.
it? Is
they
it?
See some of the things we do. They see our violence. We are motivated by possession, by rage, by anger, by envy.
Right.
But we're also motivated by compassion and love and tenderness and sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Boy, that is pretty interesting when you think about it. The human range is an amazing thing. And where I used to feel like I was less than them, what I realized again was, wait a minute.
Right.
Maybe that's not the case at all. Maybe all of the monitoring and the obsession that these other species have with the human race may be because we've cracked a new level. We've stepped out into something. They don't know what it is. We don't know how to control it. We admire it. We resent it. Bottom line, we've got something they don't have. And in that aha moment, I hollered out, And I tried to find the words. It's the first time ever in my experiences I actually tried to form words. And when I did that, I was trying to say hologram, because we're not black and white. Emotional makeup is so complex. Psychology's only tapped it. We don't really know what it really is. And they made a hologram appear floating above the table in response to my hollering out.
And okay, I'm going to say, what was it? So what was the hologram?
The hologram was just simply a picture. It was probably 3 foot wide by 3 foot high, floating above the table, almost clear. It looked like you could put your hand through it, like it almost was shown from a projector, sort of.
Okay.
And all you saw was human beings mingling inside.
What do you mean?
Just, you could see human form inside.
Oh,
like maybe just almost like pictures of humans inside.
Not a human, humans.
Not a human, no.
Okay.
They were depicting what I was trying to say, and I went, yes. The emotional makeup is a holographic kind of thing with different levels, depth, breadth to it. It's a very complex thing. It's not across the surface. I'm happy, mad, sad. No.
Right.
And they showed that in response to what I hollered out.
So they can read your mind. You're
yes.
communicating telepathically, and so you've developed a way to communicate like this with them. Obviously, this has been going on for a long time, and now you're acclimated. And this may seem like a strange question, but I have to ask. Are you able to use that with your friends or other Earthlings? Do you feel a little enlightened? Can you tell emotion? Can you read people's minds, so to speak?
Yes, things have changed.
Oh.
Things have shifted. There's another, my own emotional makeup, my own psychic abilities have expanded also. Everybody has them. We have this. This is part of our makeup also, obviously. We all have that psychic potential.
Did you have it before your
Nothing like this.
Okay.
Nothing like this. This is dramatically enhanced now. And my connection and ability to read and understand human nature has expanded dramatically.
Did they teach you anything?
Their teaching they are totally self-directed. They have their own agenda. They don't care what I think. They don't care what I feel. I'm only set to play a role in their mind. They have an idea of what they want you to do. Mm-hmm. Everybody's given a task. You're trained in that task. They show you cataclysmic events that are going to happen. They're giving you all this kind of dread about this future of what's happening to the planet, to the future. In my case, I keep being reinforced. They're telling me something's going to hit the planet. They're telling me when it's going to hit, what's going to happen, how to prepare. They turned me into a prepper. They turned me into a survivalist.
Wow.
I now live in Arizona. I moved out of California. I live in a different way entirely. I'm a total survivalist and prepper now. They put me into a whole different thing. They showed all kinds of, apocalyptic events taking place. They gave me what appears their training for me is for me to act as a liaison in comforting humans when they come out and they reveal themselves to humanity at large. There are many of us that have been trained to understand them and the humans so that we can act as a liaison. Let's face it. Suddenly you expose humanity. Look, it took me 15 years to even talk about it.
Sure.
Suddenly expose humanity. It's funny, Stephen was talking about the fact that how much Hollywood, whether they intend to or not, how much they have actually served us in helping the consciousness to start to evolve.
100%.
Kids now are not going to have the trouble.
Right.
The young people are not going to have the same trouble.
No, it's a non-issue. It's a non-issue for them.
They're going to be able to adapt to this new reality.
Right.
That we're not alone a lot more easily.
Now, you had said we've literally got maybe 5 minutes left. So let me get a couple of things in really quick. You had said that your you have an agenda that they've been showing you. I get that.
Correct.
Have you? Was there ever anybody else? Did you see anybody else, Earthling-wise, with you? Was there ever anybody else with you, or were you always alone?
My father, on one occasion before he died,
was with you, with them?
He wasn't with me. He wasn't taken with me, but he appeared on a craft.
Oh, wow. Okay.
We had no interaction. Personally.
Physically he was there, or was it a projection?
I believe physically. No, I believe it was physical. They do projections. They have a lot of emotional testing, since that's one of their major focuses.
Right.
It's emotional testing besides the hybrid thing. It's emotional testing, trying to understand us. So there was a time, my brother passed away, that they created an event to make me believe that he was there. And you learn, you can tell. After time, you can see what's real and what's not. You get to feel it and see it over time. And more and more, when you have years of these kinds of things and you're really paying attention, you begin to differentiate between, was this a dream? Was this a physical experience? Was this an astral experience?
Right.
There's a lot of different levels to the experience.
Right.
And you learn over the years, if you're really taking notes and paying attention, you begin to see the patterns.
Now, you are going to be speaking Tuesday night for UPARS. Where is that event taking place? And I'm going to let you say it, because then I'll tell everybody else what.
Oh, that's in Studio City at the Universal Life Church, I believe.
Right. I think it's on Riverside or Moore Park.
Oh, that's on Moore Park.
It's on Moore Park. And now, for everybody out there that's listening, and then I'm going to ask a couple other questions about this event, but I am going to be there too, as well. So if you would like to come out to the event and hear Nadine's story, but I want to ask a question before you go about what you're going to talk about on Tuesday. But come on out, meet me. I will be there. It's going to be a great night at the church. And
do you like the address?
Well, we're going to post everything, so we'll put it on who's going to write this down? We have the internet. The internet's going to be a big thing, Nadine. I think it's going to be huge.
It could be.
But we'll put the links up, and we'll get UPARS up there. And I've already got links up to your website as well. So I'm assuming that our web people and producers here have got everything up by the end of the show. And if they don't, if we need some more stuff there, we'll have it in the next few minutes. So that's not that big of a deal. We'll have the address up and so forth. But if you're in the LA area and you want to come out and meet Nadine, it'll be Tuesday. And like I said, I'll be there too. So come on out, and it's now, this is what I was leading up to. Are you going to discuss on Tuesday something that we ran out of time on?
I certainly am.
On what on what they've taught you and what the agenda is, and you're talking about something may impact
one of the
Earth.
focuses is going to be once you stand up and start discussing this out in public, a whole other dimension can possibly come out, and that's military involvement. So I'm going to be focusing on ET technology that I've encountered.
Oh.
And a variety of different types of technology for monitoring, for medical purposes. And I'm also going to be talking about underground military bases that I've observed and been taking to, and where ETs and humans coexist.
Why couldn't we talk about that tonight? Why?
It has a life of its own. Remember, we're just sitting in the living room talking.
Yeah, right. No, I had a great time. I'm totally excited. That is going to be amazing. So, wow.
A lot of drawings and pictures, too.
How long are they going to allow you to speak on Tuesday? That's
I'm not sure what it is. I think it's a couple hours.
Couple hours. It's always a great time at the church there, and it's the Unitarian Church, right? Yeah.
Yeah, Unitarian Universalist Church, actually. Yeah.
Yep, it's always a great time. Well, I have to say thank you. Do you have anything else? Oh, your book, by the way, is coming out May 2014. And it'll be Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And is there any other ways to get the book, or is it just through Amazon and BarnesandNoble.com?
I may or may not have it through the website, but you can get it in paperback or ebook, either way, from either of those sites.
And that's about the first. Now that's the title of the book is still You.
Well, yes.
Because
it's going to cover pretty much, a good 90% of the events that have transpired throughout my life.
Because I've seen the cover of the book, and it looks like a little girl, and so I'm assuming that's you, right?
That's an actual photograph. I went later on. That's an actual photograph of where the craft was landed.
Oh.
And I recently went back to the site and photographed it.
Okay. And is this about your experiences as a girl leading up to what happened in Sedona? And then
there are some flashbacks to some of the things that happened as a child that I later understood what was really going on. But primarily it's what's happened from the original conscious experience through the present time. I'm
excited. I can't wait till it comes out. And this, this is the thing. You and I talked earlier, and I told you, this is how the show's going to be. We're going to do this. We're going to talk for 12 minutes. We're going to break for commercial. We're going to talk for 12 minutes. We're going to break. It'll be great. We'll have different subjects, and we're going to have a great time. And all of that went out the window, young lady. we talked for an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes, no commercial break, and wow. And that's what I'm talking about. And I really had a great time. I can't put it into words. It was awesome.
Well, Jim, I appreciate it very much for having me on. It's, we're all doing what we can to bring this thing to the forefront, aren't we?
Well, yeah, and like I said, we do it for the spirit of it. And that's the point. And again, I'm inviting everybody. I'm going to be there on Tuesday. So please come out and support the cause, hang out, and we'll have a good time. Okay, Nadine, you have a blessed, wonderful weekend, and I will see you on Tuesday night.
Thanks, Jimmy. Sounds great, and you have a good night too.
Thank you very much.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow, that's what I am talking about. What a great night here on Fade to Black. And this is the thing. And I'm sorry that I ignored the phone calls. And as you can see, we went straight through and did no commercials. I just chose not to do anything because it was too good of a conversation. And so I'm sorry. I've literally got 25 unanswered emails in front of me. I see there's been a bunch of stuff on the forums after the show tonight. Let's all get together at JimmyChurchRadio.com. I'll post on the forums. I'll answer your emails tonight. I'm sorry I didn't get to any of that, but I hope it was worth it for everybody. I had an absolute amazing time. Coming up next on Dark Matter is one of my favorite shows, which is After Dark Radio Live with Brian Alvarez. And if you've never heard Brian's show, you've got to check that out. Special thanks always to Keith Rowland for having us on the network. The show is produced by, executive producer is Rita Kumurian. Show is produced by Hilton J. Palm. The announcers are Steve Harder, Mark D. Kovar, and the D is there between Mark and Kovar to separate him from all the other Mark Kovars out there in the world. There is a lot of them. The music, you're listening to it right now, is Doug Aldrich. Doug is the man. The album is Electrovision, by the way. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network. I want everybody to have a great weekend. We will have all the shows up from this week on YouTube, so you can go there, and if you've missed anything, you can go and check it out again. Shoot us an email to Jimmy@JimmyChurchRadio.com. Hit the forums, and I'll talk to you. See ya. Have a great weekend. We'll see you on Wednesday.